If we could stand for the pledge, please. I'd like to call the meeting to order.
Call the Budget Committee meeting to order.
And could Joseph Borghese, Joe, come on down. You're the next contestant on The Price is Right.
Sure, love it.
Summer Campbell. Nicholas DeGrota. Did I pronounce that right, Nicholas? Okay, good. Sarah Donovan. Ashlyn Gallant. Sean Keefe. Always give him a second to be recognized, right?
Yeah.
Lila Muse. Not yet, no problem. And Jacob Stanley. You're the last contestant on The Price is Right. Okay, you want to lead us in the pledge? Sure, all right. All of you ready?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay,
Hey kids,
hold on one
for a
second.
Where's Jacob?
You know who this guy is? This is the guy you don't want to go into his office, ever. This is the superintendent of schools.
Nah, it's always fun to see. Where's Jacob Stanley? There you go, Jacob. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Lila? Lila's not here. Sean? There you go, buddy. Thanks for coming tonight. Ashlyn? There you go, sweetheart. Sarah? Thank you, Sarah. Nicholas?
Right here.
Thank you. Have a great evening. Summer?
Summer,
There you go, Summer. And Joseph. Have a great night.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, could I have a motion on the minutes, the last minutes?
Move to approve minutes.
Second? That was Pam
Of November 1st.
and Taryn. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye, okay.
Okay, may I do the minutes for budget?
By all means.
May I have a motion to approve the minutes of November 9th for Budget Committee? Thank you, Jack and Charlton. Any discussion, corrections? Yes.
I sent you an email, just that the date at the top was incorrect. I don't know if you saw that.
I didn't, okay.
So it
Okay,
just needs to
we'll
be
correct the
changed
date.
to reflect the correct date.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? All in favor as amended?
Aye.
Oh, last Thursday, okay, so we have 4 in favor, 1 abstention. Thank you.
Like to take a motion in the non-public for 11-1-17.
Second.
Corey and Tammy, okay. Any discussion? All in favor? This actually should be roll call, but it's unanimous, so. Okay. Manifest, do we have those? I haven't got one yet, okay? Are they working their way around? Manifest, okay, all right. Resignations?
None.
Any nominations?
Not at this time.
Okay.
Sorry for the hesitation.
I'm going to hold off on the superintendent's report for a second. Could I get the student, now, ladies and gentlemen, to let you know, I'm moving the student representative report out first. Cheryl again can't be here tonight. She sent us an email last Thursday. We had Abby, who we all know Abby is here, Abby Parrott. She called maybe an hour ago. She's got a fever. So we have someone doing a dual job tonight. So we're going to have the student council representative report now, and you may see her raise her hand because she is an ex officio member of the board. If she has any questions, she'll let us know. Scott's already set it up. All she needs to do is pivot it back and forth. So we're all set. So student council report.
Okay, so Monday was I Applied Day at Sanborn, which allows seniors to apply to every single New Hampshire school, private and public, community and like traditional, at no cost. And I don't know the number of how many students participated, but I do know that I participated, and I know almost, if not all of my friends participated. And I would say that it was a success. So that was lots of students applying to college for free in New Hampshire, which I think is really great. The play is this weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, it is at 7 p.m. And on Sunday, it is at 2 p.m. And we had the senior lunch and like shortened version of the play. And I heard that it was a resounding success. So I encourage you all to go see it this weekend. Last Thursday and Friday, student council members went to the New Hampshire Association of Student Councils field conference at Waterville Valley. We attended really great workshops and we bonded as a council. And along with that, we picked our winter carnival theme, which we decided would be back in time. So it's like, it could be anywhere from the 60s to ancient Greece to the Middle Ages. It's very broad, which I think is going to be really exciting. We're going to get a wide range of different themes between all the grades. So yeah. Any questions?
Thank you.
Awesome.
Superintendent's report.
Well, I started a new habit for the superintendent's report that I wanted to share with the board, which is that I'm attempting to contact the schools prior to each board meeting to get an update of exciting events so that you know what's happening at the schools and for the public to hear that via the TV. So a couple of things might be redundant, but I wanted to share that Mr. Stack did say that we had 79 seniors take advantage of the opportunity to apply to college for free, as you heard about in our student report. And we did have a wonderful time. Chair Broderick and I and his wife and Michelle Croto all had lunch with 75 members of the senior community. We had a Thanksgiving lunch before they saw the sneak peek of the play. It was fantastic, a really fun time to have lunch, and they all got a sneak peek of the play, which is called Women in War, which is running this weekend, Thursday through Saturday, November 16th through 18th at 7 p.m. and November 19th at 2 p.m. So I hope that folks can make it for that. In athletics, our boys cross country qualified for the Meet of the Champions for the first time in history. And Megan Sheehan signed a letter of intent for Assumption College for track and academic scholarships. We're very excited about that. And on November 25th, the ice hockey boosters will hold their annual craft fair at the school. At the middle school, our field hockey A team won the Tri-County Division III championship. And the girls outdoor track won the Division 111 championship. And the middle school won the Tri-County Sportsmanship Award, which I'm particularly proud of. It's very important. And successful sixth grade trip to the Nature's Classroom in Groton, Massachusetts, where our sixth grade students spent 4 days studying outdoor activities and science. At Bakey, they had the Battle of the Books. I think that sounds really fun. And the semifinals and finals are happening this week, and Breakfast with Santa will be happening on Saturday, December 9th. We'll be hosting the Kingston senior citizens for a special dinner on Monday, December 11th. At Memorial School, they practiced their lockdown procedures with success. They collected letters for thanks for the troops overseas in collaboration with Newton volunteers. And Memorial School is hosting the Newton senior citizens for Thanksgiving dinner tomorrow. I'm hoping to join them for the second half of that because we're having a staff Thanksgiving dinner here at the high school that's being put on by the administration for the high school staff. There's a CARES Award ceremony coming up on 11/12. And I just think it's great to hear that there's so many really cool things happening in our schools to involve the community and the kids together. I want to take a moment also to talk about the central office. Mrs. Haynes, Mr. Snyder, and Mr. Trammell participated in a 2-day workshop seminar on the use of literacy data to improve student learning. The team will share the information at an upcoming district literacy meeting. And 10 Sanborn teachers and administrators participated in a full-day training by the New Teacher Center. This is a very important point to make because Mr. Trammell did a great job of getting this funded for free. He grabbed a grant opportunity to have them come and help us to develop our mentoring program for new teachers. The training was focused on the creation of a complete teacher induction program, which includes the mentor program, and the information is being used to improve Sanborn's fledgling new teacher induction program. So for those of you who don't know, that is a new program this year, and very pleased with Mr. Tamel's hard work on that very important initiative, which I think is directly linked to teacher retention. If people feel supported and cared for when they're new to our district, they're more likely to stay around. So I also want to take a moment to talk about an issue that's come up. We recently had a kind of an interesting situation where somebody pasted on one of the Facebook pages in the community that they were concerned about the excess material being put in a dumpster behind the Sanborn Seminary building. And I was very, very happy when one of the community members just did the right thing and emailed me directly to get the facts. So once they got the facts, they realized very quickly that what was happening is we receive hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the state of New Hampshire receives hundreds of thousands of dollars of free office furniture from a former Sanborn graduate who rehabilitates office spaces that are no longer being used by big businesses. So as many of you know, we have a new central office, couple of offices that were built in the central office at a very low cost. All of the furnishings for those offices came from Chief Briggs and this donor. So what happens is they'll go to a business that's no longer functioning, and they'll take everything out of the business: chairs, projectors, tables, all the material, and then we're given oftentimes first dibs to choose what's been donated for our organization, and we have benefited greatly from this effort. So what happened was there was a dumpster back there to throw away things that could no longer be used, and somebody misinterpreted that. So I just wanted to, A, let everyone in the public know what was going on and why there was a dumpster out there with material in it, and B, to let people know that the best way to find out the facts about a situation is to email me or your school principal, the high school, middle school, Memorial, or Bakey. Just contact an administrator. We will tell you the facts. It really helps to keep things from blowing up that really aren't a big deal. So thank you very much to the parent who emailed me directly, and we just want to let you all know what's going on.
Committee reports. Sorry I didn't see the committee chairman first, but rather than list each one, any committee reports for any committees?
I'll
Pam?
report. The next policy committee meeting is December 6th at 5 p.m. We're going to continue our discussion of the vape pens policy we're developing, also administrative hiring policies. We're looking into a policy on memorials for those of our community who have passed away and have a specific policy regarding that, and we'll be looking at updating obsolete policies.
Any other committee reports? Good. Oh, go ahead, Pam.
The EISA will be meeting on December 20th at 5 p.m. We'll continue our work on what I'm calling the performance grid for measuring academic success. And we're going to review our academic targets, our goals from the 5-year strategic plan, the district's annual data reports and other documents, and reviewing a recent report on performance by the 9 PACE districts. That's all.
Thank you.
The Seacoast School of Technology will be meeting Monday the 20th at 5 p.m. at the Seacoast School of Technology. This will be our budget discussion.
Okay. Now it's time for public comment. Please, if you would, keep any comments to the agenda. If there's something you'd like put on the agenda for the next meeting, absolutely bring it up. But do we have any public comments at this time? Going once, going twice, sold to the lowest bidder. Okay. Old business, Liability High School campus. I see that's still on there.
That would be Michelle. Is there
Michelle,
anything
you
to
got something
update on
that?
We do have a proposal.
Sorry, Michelle, could you?
We do have a proposal from the architects in terms of structuring a request for proposals to give us cost items on the demo. At this point, we can share that with the board to be able to take a look at it and determine if the schedule, how we want to move forward with the schedule. And it has
Can I do that?
3 different components to it. I think one of the questions was whether or not we were going to look at just those 3 components or more than that.
Okay. Dr. Brown, because we know that the budget is an item that we're going to talk about, looking at number 8, new business. If we cover that now, then I think,
Sure, could Mr. Turmel check his email on this PC up here and open up the policy document that I just sent you? So it appears on the screen up here. It's going to say in your email folder, Spring 2017 required EFAA. And hopefully you'll see it. There it is. We have a new policy regarding payments on meals purchased at our school cafeterias. This is the second reading of this new policy. The language was taken from a sample document that the New Hampshire School Board Association provided to our district. It's a mandated policy, and we tweaked it a bit to reference specific buildings on campus and specific ways that payment can be received for meals purchased on campus. This has been posted for a while on our website. It is a 6-page, single-spaced document. It's very detailed. Has to do with federal school lunch programs and how meals are purchased. It describes the use of the meal account and how to pay for it. On page 2, I'll just briefly mention, it states that parents who establish a meal account for their student are responsible for establishing with their student any restrictions the parent chooses to place on the use of the account. Unless restricted by the parent, a student may purchase a la carte items, snack items, in addition to regular meal choices. It also notes that the district will allow students to purchase a meal even if the student's meal account has insufficient funds. It has a policy on free and reduced meals, which is a federally supported program. It indicates the district will ensure parents are informed of the eligibility requirements for federal free assistance and reduced cost meals. On page 3, there's a policy on students that lack cash in hand or a positive account balance, and states, regardless of whether a student has money to pay for a meal or has a negative balance in the student meal account, a student requesting a meal shall be provided with a meal from the choices available. And there's finally a policy for collecting meal payments that are due, outstanding balances, which we have in this new policy, and there's a section on special dietary needs on page 4. So again, this is a new policy. It's required for our district. Please don't panic. If you see something in the new policy once approved, it's not written in stone. We can always revisit it and make changes. So could I have a motion to approve the new policy?
A motion to approve policy EFAA, school lunch program meal policy as modified and dated October 27th, 2017.
Second.
get that all right? Any discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. Okay, so that takes care of that. Okay, that takes care of that. So I think about the only thing we have is you.
I just would like to make a quick note to the administrators here. If you could, that policy that we just adopted is very long. Please read it because it does affect the way that we do business with the kids. And I just thought I'd take a moment to make sure that you all, while I'm thinking of it, remember to take a good solid read of that one. All right. Process to get us started. What I've done is I've taken every question for today that was submitted to the Google document by Annie Collier, or members of the board. Annie submitted the questions on behalf of the BudCom, and the board members submitted them directly. And then what Michelle and I did was we went through them all and took any questions that were duplicates, tried to make it as efficient as possible, but really there were only maybe 1 or 2 duplicate questions. So you should see every question here that's appropriate for today. There may be some questions. There were some high school questions that will go on the 30th. So if you don't see those, just think about it. It probably was from the high school perspective. It is tricky because some district things kind of blend in with the high school naturally, and all the schools, because our district programs should affect all the schools. So what I'm going to do for process is I'm going to answer each question and then ask if there are any clarifying questions instead of going all the way to the end and then going all the way back to the beginning. So the goal is we answer the question and then we take feedback or more questions for the leadership team, which has worked very, very hard on what you're about to see. And then we'll move on, but I really would prefer not to go back if everyone's okay with that. Okay? All right, so here we go. The first few are important in the sense that, now I don't typically read from slides when I'm presenting, but in this instance I'm going to, because these slides are going to be posted on the website tomorrow morning. So the first question was, what do you identify as needs priorities for education of students in your school? The answer for that question is that we analyze a variety of information, including but not limited to student academic performance, student discipline, and attendance in order to determine and prioritize educational need. I'm going to take this whole slide because it was one huge question that I broke into multiple pieces, and then I'll let you all ask questions about this slide. And then the next part was, what are the challenges? There are not enough resources to support students who are struggling to learn and professional development for staff. We need continuous ongoing professional development such as literacy coaching at the elementary levels, and the high school needs to continue to develop math curriculum to address the SAT. Somebody make a note of that slide, SAT. Thank you.
What's SAT?
The Scholastic Aptitude Test in 11th grade. It's on your cheat sheet that I made for you.
Yeah, it's not on here.
This would be SAT.
How do you want to meet these challenges? Create a culture that supports continuous improvement of student learning while improving instructional practices. Question, how will you / do you measure student education outcomes? Again, I did not modify any questions. They're just here and then with answers. We tried to keep this as clean and transparent as possible. This will be defined once the board and the community define student success. So as you know, the board has made a decision to spend this year defining student success. And then that should drive our strategic and facilities plan. And that will have, you'll see a lot more about that in the next few slides. Any clarifying questions about this slide? And Mr. Swayze, I'll have Michael change that to Scholastic Aptitude Test right on the slide so it goes on the web that way. We're trying to
Just the people at home don't have a cheat sheet in front of them.
Yeah, I promise you. I hear you, and you'll find there are very few acronyms in this whole document.
Well, there's some coming up.
Oh, boy. Keep starting with them, turn them in.
I will.
All right, we're trying.
Is this the time for questions?
Yep, for this slide.
For this slide.
Yep.
What's a literary coach?
Literacy coach? A literacy coach is a professional that works with teachers on their instructional practice in their classrooms in real time with students. They provide ongoing, continuous professional development. We did not put them in the budget for this year because we felt that it was too much of an increase based on the criteria that the board had asked for. What you're going to see in these first few slides is that this person asked us, what is it that you feel like you need that you don't have? So that's where this starts off. And it goes into the details of what we actually asked for.
So it's not for the students.
It is for the students because it improves the teacher's skill at teaching the students. And oftentimes it's directly related to interpreting assessments and planning lessons based on those assessments.
In the question about your assessing your needs, you talked about resources to support students who are struggling, as well as development of the professional staff. There's nothing specifically mentioned about enrichment, which is a tiny, teeny drop in the bucket of the total budget. Is that addressed later in these questions?
Yes,
or?
enrichment was asked about. There's a detailed slide about
Thank
that. And I just want to be clear, Mary, that certainly it's very important to recognize that if you study what we call in some states, like Maine, gifted learners, they are more likely to drop out than any other student. So really gifted kids who are truly way above the norm, have a lot of difficulty engaging in school. And so the literacy coaches that I'm talking about in this slide should help with that engagement in the classroom. So that it doesn't just meet the needs. The literacy support or ongoing professional development should not just address the students who are struggling. It should support all students in making adequate annual growth.
Could you elaborate a bit more on the statement, not enough resources to support students who are struggling?
Sure. So I tried to keep this, as concise as possible, but the reality is that we have a lot of paraprofessionals who are working with students who are struggling at this point. And if you asked me in my initial assessment of our work as a team, which I'm still, it's only been 4 months, so we need to take a little more time here to look at this. But if you think about the research says that you want the most highly qualified people working with the students who struggle the most. We currently have a model where the least qualified people are working with the students who struggle the most in terms of remediation. We do have 2 teachers who provide literacy support for kids at the elementary level. But before I could justify coming forward with asking the board and the community for more money for this, I felt like I needed more time with the team to look at data and information. I feel like for our team, because so many of us are new, that this is really the first step of a 2 to 3 year process. We're really just starting to figure out what's going on with our data, what the needs really are. This is an initial brush to give feedback based on the question that was asked.
Thank you.
May I move to the next slide? Yeah, Dr. Brown.
Question. I just think we need to be careful with requests for professional development funds in general, because I did review the UNH education degree course listing online, and there are at least a dozen courses that the teachers take or have offered available for exceptional, gifted, and special needs students. And for me, they should be here trained to attend to those students' needs, generally speaking. So if there's a specific area where it's special ed, for example, I understand professional development's important, but ideally they're trained in school, in college, and in graduate school before they reach a school district.
I don't know that you're asking me a question. What's the question?
I'm just asking that we have specific outcomes tied to this professional development money when we spend it, that's all.
Sure, thank you. Well, I'll talk about that in an upcoming slide. Anything else on this slide? All right. The next question is, how do you handle teacher and other staff evaluations? The answer is we follow the process adopted by the district, which is outlined in the Professional Development Master Plan 2016 to 2021. It's a pretty established process. We don't alter that in general. How many employees have been put on PIPs, and have any been on a PIP more than once? And if so, what is the range of times and number of employees for each number of times on PIPs? I talked with the administrative team, and I want to be honest, I didn't know how to answer this, because professional improvement plans are personnel matters that really aren't public to be, I don't feel comfortable discussing that in this setting. I would be happy to address that in a non-public session. I want to be clear, though, that professional improvement plans, traditionally, are ineffective at improving teaching and learning. They are. They're not an effective way to do it. If we want to improve teaching and learning, professional development is what is effective. If it's done properly, as Dr. Brown said, with clear goals and outcomes, just like we want clear goals and outcomes for our students. And then the professional improvement plans, let's see, the next one is, I just can't see the slides very well this far away. What systems are in place to solve the performance gaps and help improve them? The answer is thank you for this. We currently have limited professional development. Thank you, Phyllis, that's great. District funds of approximately $30,000 in professional improvement plans. We also have teachers working collaborative in professional learning communities, PLCs. Just wanted to make sure that Charlie knew that I did spell that out on purpose just for him.
Yeah, but you didn't get the pips and it's not on your cheat sheet either.
Professional improvement plans are in slide 3 in the middle. It says professional improvement plan. That's a PIP. All right, so we also have teachers working collaboratively in professional learning communities to share teaching strategies. So it's so important for people to realize that there are systems in place to solve performance gaps. But this isn't a situation where you're putting together a car and you can do it faster or better. Every single student is an individual. And when we're assessing human beings' effectiveness at teaching children, we have to be very careful to look at the whole picture. And that's what makes this work so hard. All right, so I'm gonna go on. Oh, I'm sorry. Questions on that slide? Thank you, Andy.
I had 2 questions. One is there a place where we can look at the professional development master plan? Is that on the website, or is that?
It's on the website, and I can send it up to you a link if it's not.
Okay, thank you. And my second question was $30,000 for professional development. That's what % of the whole budget?
0.001, Michelle?
Yeah.
Less than 0.001?
You just give them a softball.
I just gave him a softball because I'm horrified.
I have to tell you that when I got here, my first question is, what do we have for professional development money? Because I was thinking about the high school math scores on the Scholastic Aptitude Test. And I just wanted to make sure that you knew that was, when I found out the amount of money that we had, I truly was very concerned. We're having a side conversation here. I'll let Chair Broderick handle that. All right, you ready? Any other questions?
I have a question and an observation.
Great.
First, on the question regarding how many employees, I totally disagree that there's nothing in that discloses personal, confidential, or legal matters.
Yep.
So somebody wants to know how many employees, that's just a number. How many of one number on more than once, that's just a number. Mm-hmm. And the other question, I disagree, that's not a non-public issue.
Okay.
I totally disagree with that.
Okay.
Now, can you tell me what a professional learning community is?
Yes, a professional learning community is when a group of people, it started in the medical model when a group of 5 or 6 doctors would get together and talk about a patient. And so they might say, I've tried these strategies to help this patient get better over a number of years or time, and they were failing, so they would say to their colleagues, can you look at all this information, and is there a strategy that I'm missing or a way to handle this patient that would be better? And what they found out was that by having collegial input into their practice, that they actually got way better, which is why doctors have peer review so often. What's happened in schools is that we found out that if teachers sit down and take a look at student work, talk about student learning, and the way that they're actually teaching the children, then they share practices among one another, and the hope, typically, it occurs that teaching and learning improves. So it really is a system for reviewing benchmarks, looking at information and data, finding out what's happening with kids and teaching practices, and then making strategic decisions about how to improve them. I want to be clear back to Dr. Brown's point that the professional development money should be tied to the needs identified by the PLCs. That it shouldn't just be the administration saying, we're hiring so-and-so to come in and tell you how to do it. That's not my goal. My goal is to have the teachers tell us what they need to help them do it better, and then support them. In fact, I met with the math PLC today. They had a really nice Skype session with another community in New Hampshire, and we started the conversation about high school math today.
Question 1, how do you handle teacher and other staff evaluations? I myself am trying to understand how that's related to the budget. And because this is a budget discussion and not theory necessarily. I mean, I could see there's a question that's asked later on. I'm only just saying this out loud right now because I want to be cognizant there's a few more rounds of this, correct?
Yep, one more.
One more. I'm just trying to see how that actually...
Yeah, I agree. I think questions need to be focused on the budget. And other questions are great to ask, but let's not tie up everybody's time that's here.
Well, let me comment on that, if I may. The Budget Committee has the duty to present a budget to the voters. In order to present a budget to the voters, any question that the Budget Committee members feel that they need to understand in order to understand how the district works is appropriate. And it is appropriate according to the RSAs. So we're not wasting anyone's time, we're doing our job.
Oh, I think it's fine to ask. I'm not sure that this meeting where people are here to see the
doesn't have to
budget.
be
It's actually part of the budget.
Well, I guess my comment would be, I think the people are more interested in the dollars and cents. And when it comes to questions like that, perhaps they could be answered to the Budget Committee. And it's going to be a hard decision to make. Is this a dollar and cents one, or is this but rather than spend time tonight, could we expedite it by having direct answers from the superintendent to you? I don't know. You're the Budget Committee.
I think that the Budget Committee has submitted questions, and I think we're wasting time that's valuable to our voters and people who are watching right now by discussing whether the Budget Committee has the right to ask a question or not.
No, I'm not saying you don't have the right to ask the question. I'm just saying maybe we spend a few minutes now to expedite the next meetings, and perhaps shorten those. I guess my question is, or what I'm trying to point at, maybe I'm using the wrong language here, but if you have questions about how the school district is operating, that's okay, ask those by all means. But I'm not sure it's directly related to budget questions that the people are interested in the dollar and cents. So the answer could be given to you in an email to satisfy the questions of the Budget Committee, but I'm not sure how productive it is to go in this meeting tonight on it. Jim?
This is a joint meeting of the Budget Committee and the school board that the public is invited to attend, part of the RSAs. Everything talked about in these questions and tonight requires resources. It's all got to come down to dollars and cents at some point. We owe it to the community to listen to everybody's questions, get the answers, and then just move on.
Yeah. I agree.
So let's do that.
I'm looking at the budget process myself. I'm just saying this out loud, and I'm critiquing every single question that's asked here, and every answer that you're answering along with the leadership team ahead of you is how is this impacting student outcomes? Every single line item here, every single question should be about student outcomes. How is this money being spent, and how is it helping you increase outcomes? You increase my daughter's outcomes. You increase. So, the learners of today, the students, are the leaders of tomorrow. And because of that, I want to make sure that we're asking the right questions to go ahead and put forth a budget that makes sure that they become the leaders of tomorrow. And quite frankly, you are right, everything's tied to a dollar. But how is everything that we're asking here geared towards increasing outcomes? That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think asking a question about what is a learning community and how that works.
I don't want to get into a fight and derail your conversation, so I apologize.
Look, I want to be clear. I don't have a problem with any of these questions. We can agree to disagree. It's no problem. I'm not comfortable sharing as the superintendent of school without a conversation with this board in a non-public session, anything regarding professional or personnel improvement plans. I'm just not comfortable with it. I didn't have time to meet with you all. We haven't had a meeting, so I'll talk to them tonight. We're having a non-public. If the board feels comfortable with me sharing certain information, once we discuss it, I'd be more than happy to do that. Right? I don't have any problem with any questions. What I've heard consistently from every single person I've met with since July 1st, which is a lot of people for a lot of hours, is transparency is a concern. And so my feeling is that I want these answers to be, I want the questions to be exactly the way they were written to us, and I want to be transparent about what our answers are. If I give an answer this evening that someone isn't comfortable with, I'll converse with the board about the answer, and we'll have a conversation about what to share and what not to share, because it's totally transparent, right? Our team worked really hard. You're going to see there's a lot more to this document. And all joking aside, sincerely, we are trying to help people to clearly understand exactly what's being said. And we have tried. It's so natural for us to put in acronyms and words that we understand, and I understand that someone at home who's going to read the slide tomorrow when it's on the website need to understand what it means. So please, I mean, I love to joke with Mr. Swayze, but he's correct that we need to correct those acronyms. We need to be fair and transparent to everyone in the community. So I'll keep going, okay? Thank you. All right, thank you. All right, so please don't be scared by this slide, but I want you to understand that when someone asks us a question, we're going to answer it directly. Next slide. This slide is kind of a bit of a wish list. If you ask us as a team, what solutions or costs would you implement if funds and logistics were unlimited? This list is a piece of what would be required to do some of the work that I've done in other school districts to great results. So I'm going to tell you what these are. Literacy coaching for grades K through 8 would be about $200,000. Contracting with Columbia University's Teachers College to provide professional development in the district, $80,000. Send staff to Columbia University for training, $80,000. This is annually, not a one-shot deal. Set up summer institutes to share teaching practices, at least $100,000. Buy teachers books for their classroom libraries, $1,000 per classroom per K-8 until all classrooms have 500 texts. If you have 17 or 18 students in a classroom and you have 100 texts for one genre, such as science, that means that you have 5 books per student if you have 100 books. That's very, very small when you're asking students to read independently and think about their reading for an hour at a time. Provide more training on effective professional learning communities would be $60,000 to $100,000. Analyze and review the curriculum scope and sequence to make changes based on student data. It's hard to estimate because of staff salary, stipend, and possible outside expertise. Clerical support for our business administrator and curriculum director would be approximately $60,000. The next slide has a few more things that we feel that we could use to move the district forward. Fully fund the extracurricular activities that meet a threshold for participation. The cost would have to be determined on that threshold. Develop professional development based on the adopted definition of student success, which is estimate the financial implications once the definition is established. Hire permanent subs for each school. We are having a shortage of substitute teachers. It's very, very challenging. This would be $42,000 per student. Mr. Tamel, can you note I need to fix that slide? There's a typo. Expand early college options for SRSD students, and after the start time, which alter the start time. Our students are in the building at 7:15 at our middle and high schools because of the bus runs, not because it's what's best for education. So if funds were unlimited, we would move that to be a later time based on research. This is just a smattering of some of the things that we could do and will need to do if we're going to meet these targets of increasing academic performance significantly.
Question, the first one, literacy coaching for grades K to 8, $200,000. How would that be spent? Is that
It would be
personnel?
2 professional staff members who would actually work with teachers in their PLCs and in their classrooms to improve their instructional practices.
Okay, so it's staffing.
Yes,
Okay.
research shows that ongoing professional development is critical to successful teaching. And I do agree with Dr. Brown. It would be optimal if you take a class at UNH and you do the work there, but that doesn't bring the teacher from UNH right into your classroom working with your kids on your data and the growth that you need to do. That's how we moved the kids at my job in Freeport. That's how we got 89% of them reading at grade level before the end of 2nd grade. We did all of these things that I've just listed here, almost all of them.
I had one other, and that is on the permanent subs for each school. Kind of part A and part B. One is $42,000. Does that include benefits?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Would it be possible to take some of the substitute teacher funds and use them to hire those permanent subs?
It would be, but the problem is that the daily rate for our substitutes, which is something I plan to bring to the board for discussion in December, is a concern because it's so low. So hiring someone to work every day plus benefits is far more than $70 or $75 a day for subs. So we have to have a substitute pool because we can do a 5-year analysis of our subs and the number of subs, but the problem with analyzing that is that we would probably spend significantly more if we could get people to sub. So what happens is we have students who have needs that have to have their needs met another way on a day when we have to take the paraprofessional and put them in a classroom because we have kids who need a classroom teacher. I mean, it is a very complex topic.
Okay, then part C of that was, if we were to have some of the staffing for the professional development, could they also sometimes be substitutes? Or is that something that just isn't even a possibility?
Well, I think that to be fair, when a teacher's out and there's a classroom that needs to be covered, the principals are subbing. I mean, I know that Mr. Rutherford and his assistant principal have spent a significant amount of time teaching classes recently, so when there's no one in the classroom, all bets are off, right? I mean, everybody has to help out. And that's part of, we have a wonderful team and we make it work, but part of what I wanted to bring to light is that they're just barely making it work.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your questions, and I do think that we couldn't cut, to answer it directly, it would be very difficult to cut the lines of substitute teachers to hire a sub. We would need to do that and then watch it for a couple of years and then reduce the lines accordingly if it was shown the data that it made a difference. It's more about having someone there to sub than the funds to pay the sub. So if anyone wants to sub, we'd love to have you.
Question D about the, how many, is that 4 permanent subs you're looking at?
It's $42,000 per sub, so it would be $128,000.
And then, as far as the professional development, is it a true statement, and going back to slide 3, where we currently have a $30,000 budget, are you looking, would this be an expansion to that with some of these line items, or are you saying in addition to going from 30 to say 50 to $100,000?
Well,
or is this burying that in that?
Yeah, so thanks, Corey. So, again, the question was very specific. So we struggled with how to answer it because we didn't want to put a shock value out there to people. But the reality is that our district, in my initial analysis, is woefully underfunded in professional development, and thankfully has been supported by the state in the PACE effort to help us to learn how to be effective at assessments. Mr. Tamel just had a significant document come back to him showing that our teachers are scoring assessments at a very high level of validity. So that PD has paid off in our district. What we have to do now is take the knowledge from those assessments and apply it to instruction. So I would say that $100,000 could be, if this level of support was funded, I would say that, Mr. Mason, that $100,000 would be a part of this whole thing.
Okay.
Right? So, I mean, it certainly, if we had Columbia University come here and provide professional development, that money could be counted toward that. But again, the professional development needs to be driven by the needs identified by teachers. They're the ones doing the work, and the administration should support those needs. Our data suggests so far that if we want to improve our reading scores based on our strategic plan, that the work with Columbia would make sense. The work for math at the high school will look completely different based on the needs of those teachers. Did I answer your question?
Thank you. Yes, sir.
All right. Any more on these 2 slides?
A brief question regarding our substitute crisis,
Sure.
and if you want to label it as such. Is the rate of teacher absenteeism in our district higher than that of surrounding areas, or do we just have a lack of people interested in dedicating the effort for being substitute teachers?
I haven't analyzed, I have not gone and looked at, how many subs. I know subs are a problem everywhere, from here to western foothills of Maine. So every place I've ever worked, subs have been a problem. And I think that I haven't noticed through approving absences or our office approving absences in our software for absences, I haven't noticed an inordinate number of them that have jumped out at me, but I haven't done a statistical analysis to support that point. The problem is that people don't want to come work at a school for $75. I mean, just to be honest, it's the rate of pay that seems to be the problem, combined with people who are adequately trained and good at doing it. So the people who are good substitutes are working a lot, and we really do need more subs. So if you have any family or friends.
My quick comment, Chair. 2 years ago, we had to, end of the year, we had to approve nearly a 3x increase of the health, the nurses. There was a nurses shortage, what have you, and we're like 3 times less. And all these substitutes work for an agency, and they're knowing they're going to Exeter because they're going to pay more before they're coming here. So, and that was like 3 times just the health side of it. I want to see for that.
Thank you.
I do want all of you to know that I'm going to bring the issue of substitutes up to the board in December. To have a conversation about what to do about it. The administrators have asked me to talk to you all about it. So, can I move? Oh, is it okay to move on? Sorry, I should check in. All right. So now we're on to kind of the nitty-gritty questions, so to speak. What does preschool staff travel to visit homes of students, to monitor students placed in community programs entail, and why is this necessary? The answer is that preschool staff travel refers to the district occupational therapist / pre-K coordinator and the speech and language pathologist who travel back and forth between Beatty and Memorial to provide services to students and families. They also visit sending preschools and some homes of students. Per the contract, they are reimbursed at the IRS mileage rate. Any follow-up questions on that question? Okay. What is the propane used for in each school? At the Beatty School, hot water and food service. At Memorial School, hot water, heating, and food service. At the middle school modulars need heat. And at the high school, it's food service. Any follow-up questions on that one? Okay. Question, what maintenance is included in these items, included in object line 54,300 and 56,100, that's distinct from what's covered under maintenance service baking? The question included object line 54,300 and 56,100. Line 54,300 is for contracted maintenance services, outside vendors for repairs to custodial and grounds-related equipment, such as floor machines, auto scrubbers, tractors, mowing machines, snow throwers, etc., not able to be repaired or serviced utilizing in-house staff. So in other words, there are things that can't be fixed by our folks. Line 56,100 is for supplies for in-house repairs to custodial-related equipment as well as grounds-related equipment. These supplies would include parts and components for work that can be completed by in-house staff. So that's the part that can be completed by in-house staff. These items include but are not limited to belts, hoses, wheels, motors, brushes, lubricants, etc. Any questions about that question or answer? Okay. What is the gasoline / diesel used for in the schools? Gasoline and diesel fuels are used for the district-owned vehicles.
May I ask how many district-owned vehicles we have currently?
I do not know the answer to that question. Michelle, do you?
I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know.
Can we get back to you?
I do have that information, but I would hate to say a number and.
Nope, that's fine. Thank you.
Michelle, could you note that and we'll answer that for you? So we'll answer that next week. Thank you for asking. Any other questions?
So the cost for gasoline and the budget for Beatty and Memorial, was that an aggregated cost and it just was sort of split out?
I think there's an upcoming question about the gas at Beatty and Memorial. Can you let me know if I don't get to that, okay? Because I think it is, there's different lines for gas. So there's gas and diesel fuel for our district-owned vehicles, and then there's gas for staff travel.
Mm-hmm.
They're two different lines.
Okay.
So folks asked about the Beatty and Memorial School gas, and I found out, because I wondered myself when it came up, that it was indeed for staff travel. I believe that's coming up in another slide. And please let me know if we don't answer that question throughout this next week.
Okay.
Okay? What are the projected enrollment numbers per school? So as of November 15th, we're projecting 354 at Beatty, 275 at Memorial. The middle school is 311 and the high school 682. I want to be clear that fluctuates every month. So it is always an estimate and a moving target. And there are two things that always make me very nervous about projecting enrollments. Kindergarten and high school. Because kindergarten, we don't know what's coming. In high school, you don't know who's going to leave or move out or be here. right? Some kids go to private school and high school, and sometimes you have more, and sometimes you have less. So I'm sorry, any questions about that? Yep.
So when you say projected as of November 15th this year, is that projected through the year, or is that for next year, 2018-19?
We're saying that based on our current enrollments as of November 15th,
Yep.
that if every kid moved forward, plus what we think is coming for kindergarten, this is what it would be
In 18-19?
for 18-19.
Okay.
But I want to be clear, it won't be these numbers. I just want to be totally transparent. It is very difficult to anticipate. I think Mrs. Mahoney had a question
That
as
was
well.
my question
Okay,
also.
any other questions?
I don't need it tonight, but I'd like to know what the student capacity is for each school.
Sure.
And especially the high school. We asked that question last year and never
Didn't
got
get
an
an
answer.
answer?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's a common question, especially for the high school. What's the student capacity?
thank you. We can do it for all schools. Be happy to do that. I'd like to know that myself.
Okay, thanks.
Good question. Can you submit that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh.
All right, I'm sorry, I want to keep going because there's so many questions.
Yeah,
There's
keep
50
going.
questions, and we're on like question 7 or 8, so, but don't rush, please. Any other, going once, going twice? Or,
So I'm sorry, but I'm looking at these, I'm comparing the numbers that are on the cover pages for each of the schools.
Mhm.
There are enrollment numbers on those pages, and I'm just comparing the numbers. You're expecting an increase in enrollment in the high school of, what, 40, almost 40 students?
I think it's very, very hard to tell because we don't know what Fremont's going to send and who is going to go to private school. So again, when Brian looked at these numbers, and tonight we're not discussing, he can talk about that next week we're on the 30th.
Go back to, so Memorial.
But I just want to make sure you know that this is based on today's numbers, right?
So
These-
Memorial School, 268 this year, you did 275 next year, so you're also expecting an increase?
I could expect a decrease. The first year I was a K2 principal, I had 25 kids move into first grade. 25. We had 5 classrooms, and they were packed. 2 years later, we had to go down to 4. It's so hard to tell with early elementary and high school. It's pretty predictable from first grade, because a lot of parents will send their kids to a private kindergarten. First grade is tough, kindergarten's tough. Grades 2 through 8 are pretty steady in general, but when you put Fremont in the mix, it gets tricky. It does. These are based on today's numbers. Yeah.
In your defense, it looks like school choice is going to pass in New Hampshire and the governor's going to sign it, which is going to put a skew on everything in here and
I just lived it in Maine.
every number, budgets, schools, everything.
It's brutal.
Just going to change everything. And that's in your defense. You can't predict that either.
It is really
That's going to be
hard.
tremendous impact if it passes.
And this is going to bring us kind of to closing comments at the end of the 30th. We have to establish as an organization a reasonable amount of what I would consider to be reserve funds so that we can be clear and transparent that we have this amount of money in reserves for special education. We need to hire a paraprofessional for a student that moves in. I come to the board and say to the board, we need to spend this. I'm looking for your approval so that it's public and noted. The way things have been working here in the past is that there's just kind of this money and things get spent, and I feel like we can be very, very clear about that, but included in that, Mr. Swayze, needs to be a significant amount of money that is clearly placed in the regular ed lines to be used for those types of circumstances so that we may not fill every single position going into a year, but we have the funds should we need to based on enrollments. It's creating what I would call a much more dynamic budgeting process for public schools, and that's exactly what we saw in Maine. It's going to get harder. Any further questions? What size is Beatty versus Memorial in square feet? Please distinguish the building size from the grounds. The Beatty School building square footage is 58,785. Memorial School building square footage is 42,804, which includes 2 attached modular classrooms and a standalone 2-classroom unit with ADA compliant toilet room.
I have a question about the modular classrooms. I remember a couple of years ago, it was recommended that we purchase those leases out. Were they ever purchased? Do we own those classrooms, or are they still leased?
There, the last year of the lease is in the current year, so there is no lease payment in this budget that we're looking at now.
Okay, so they're over as of this year?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Not only do we own them, but I don't love them. Just want to be honest about that. We've got probably enough square footage district-wide to figure out an alternate plan, but that would be part of the facilities study that's going to be done by the committee set up by the board with community input.
Question? This was my question, or at least I was one of the ones that asked this question. And the reason that I asked it is because when I was looking at I looked at the bottom line budget numbers for Bakey versus Memorial, knowing that Bakey has a higher enrollment and apparently it's larger. I was surprised that the total budget is almost identical for each of those. It's $4.5 million roughly for each. And I was surprised. Do you know why? I would expect Memorial to have a lower budget since it's smaller with a smaller enrollment.
At this point in my work here, I do not know the answer to that question, and nor would Michelle or any of us. We're still in the stages of figuring out. A great example to that question is, I talked to the administrative team and I said, one thing we have to do now that I've seen this budget and looked at these questions, do we have a per pupil allocation for supplies, books? Because that would lend itself to that question. Why is it that if you have 270 students, how does that all line up? We need time to pull that all apart. We don't know.
Okay.
It's an essential question that we're asking as a team. Yes. Yes.
So Memorial's budget is higher overall because of special education purposes. We have out-of-district students placed from various home schools, and then they're placed in other areas. That money is shown in the budget from their home school location. So Memorial is up because of some specific students that are placed out of district.
On the reference of Memorial School, the heating and the modular units. I see that in the next slide you talk about the utilities there, but it doesn't, I'm curious, there's a heat pump at the Memorial School. I assume that's for the main building?
I would assume so.
Do you know what heats the modular units?
I think it's propane.
Propane.
Michelle?
Yeah, that was answered in one of the slides earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Follow up on the out-of-district placement. As I recall, that's about $375,000 for the two elementary schools, of which about 220. This was from the DOE, and I'm going by memory, but from the DOE as of 2 years ago. I'm wondering, what is the actual cost of our out-of-placements, or is that something we should ask next week?
Please ask it next week because I can give you some more information. Each student and
Thank you.
each placement has a different cost associated with it, plus transportation on top of that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yep. One quick comment, Mr. Chair. The CIP from last year, the 2018-2022, for those who are wondering, actually has a lot of these details in them as well, albeit the individual sections, the year they were built, and some of the space as well. So if you guys want to refer to this document,
Which one is that?
the capital improvement plan that we.
Oh, yes, okay.
Thank you, Board.
Yep.
Any further questions? Right. All right, let's see, we're on to slide 9. Please describe the rental equipment covered under line item 2609. This line item, rental of equipment, includes the following: trash and recycling receptacles and waste removal at all school locations, trash compactor rental at high school location, lease agreement for air source heat pumps and energy recovery ventilators, that's at the Memorial location, the solar hot air system lease, the thermal power purchase agreement, at Memorial, serving gymnasium as well as the rooftop unit that serves the food service kitchen, solar hot air system lease, and that's the thermal power purchase agreement at the high school. And I have to say that some of these systems issues, if there are further clarifying questions, I have no idea Steve Riley would need to answer them at the next meeting. We tried to group the district stuff at the next meeting on the 30th, but some of these were specific to the buildings. So Mr. Riley provided a lot of information, but Michelle and I are happy to have him. He'll be at the next meeting, so we'd like, we can ask him to elaborate.
I do have a question. Do you know, Michelle, how long the lease purchase agreement has run in either of these cases, or is that a question we should ask?
I'm not sure that I'm following your question.
It says the thermal power purchase agreement is a solar hot air system lease, so I assume it's a lease to purchase.
That's something I would have to research. If you want to add that to the list of questions, I'm happy to look into that.
Yep. Thank you.
Any other questions on that one? Okay. Is oil not used at Memorial because of the heat pump and solar there or something else? Fuel oil is on site and is only used when there are extended periods of extreme cold. Air source heat pumps lose efficiency when temps fall below sub-zero.
I noticed in the proposal there was no money for fuel oil at that location. That's why I asked that question. So is there an amount that should be applied for that, or?
I'd have to defer to Steve or Michelle on that one.
Okay.
We'll find that out, Jim. I think that's a great question. And Jim, I would say that we want to at least hold the line on that one with a dollar in it, if that's the case, so that if we need to transfer funds there for some emergency purpose, we should have at least a dollar in there. Thanks for asking, Jim. We'll find that out for you. Okay, to go on to the next question. With use of solar at Memorial, why is electric highest? Because of the heat pump or something else? And the answer is the electrical usage is higher at the Memorial School due to the air source heat pumps, heating and cooling, and ERV, which is the energy recovery ventilation units. The solar hot air system provides solar heated air to the gymnasium and multi-purpose space only. You guys okay? From this point forward, if I don't see a hand go up, I'm just going to keep going, okay? I'm trying to be polite, and I slow myself down a little bit. I just know how much detail's in here. Question, would costs at Bakey be reduced by a heat pump solar tube? Energy cost reductions may be a possibility with the introduction of air source heat pumps and solar arrays. There would be multiple factors to consider, such as projected future cost of electricity. Oh, did you change that yet, Michael? I just changed it again. Sorry about that, guys. Projected future cost of electricity, energy efficiency of the building envelope, ROI, return on investment. Staff and families have expressed concern about equity because some locations have climate control and others do not. This should all be considered in the long-range facilities planning. The middle school's combined costs for above are the lowest, yet this is where windows need replacing. Please comment. The middle school's energy consumption is lowered due to multiple reasons. Heating ventilation control system, which is direct digital controls. Steve had to explain that to me, but basically it just makes the system run way more efficiently. Whereas other schools have low voltage pneumatic controls, so you can imagine you're turning the knob instead of having it run for you. Less effective and efficient. The building envelope, heat recovery units, phase change material above the ceiling space. These controls should be considered in a long-range facilities plan. So again, as we begin to have the conversation about our buildings and what to do next, Steve felt strongly that replacing these controls would be a really good idea, but the windows would still save a significant amount of money in the long run.
I know the direct digital controls have been on the proposal a number of years in the past and continue to get cuts. I know Steve isn't here, but I really would like to have an ROI on investing in them if it's going to make a difference.
Yeah, sure. Michelle, could you make sure that Steve reports out on those for next week? Or 2 weeks from now, the 30th? 2 weeks in a day. Yeah. Another question? I saw a hand go up, but everyone good? Okay. If available, please provide a comparable breakdown of how online access is used at Bakey and Memorial as provided for the middle school. Is it possible to get a report of usage of the various programs included in these subscriptions? Please break down the access fee totals per school, the number of students in the relevant year, and the cost per student for the past 3 years plus FY19. Is it possible to get a report of usage of the various programs for these subscriptions? And does the district have a minimum number of hours students using on a particular program to assess its value need for the curriculum of the students? And the answer is, no, we don't have that. I want to be blunt and honest because we are working on it hard. We have a massive spreadsheet that Mr. Tamel has spent hours looking at and verifying. And I think personally that this is something that needs to be deeply looked at in terms of expense, use, and it needs to have the time and attention to take a look at it, not for next year, but potentially even for this year. So it's an ongoing, no, we don't have it today. Yes, it's an ongoing project and it's a significant undertaking. As I said in my answer here, just for the public and the camera, we're working to compile this information to consider the implications for the next budget cycle and possibly this year. We funded these items flat from year to year because we really need to assess these variables. I was a little bit confused when I saw the list of all the different software programs that we own. And frankly, I was kind of wondering, I don't know how anyone as a teacher could implement all of this. So I need to do a lot of homework on this. So it's going to take a little bit of time, but I also want to be careful to do it right. So for the sake of the folks that have done a really good job of implementing technology and using it, should we accidentally pull the plug on something that somebody uses every day, that would be a horrible thing to do to a teacher, because I live with the teacher and I know what it's like to see her spend hours getting something up and running and then have everyone just say, we're not going to do that anymore.
Am I reading this correctly, or whoever asked this question? Online access, we're talking about technology in the classroom being leveraged, is that correct? On face computer time, is that right?
Yeah, the access
Yeah, so
for the analysis, yeah.
This came in from several people.
fair enough, but I guess what I want to say is, like, I don't want to hear that Mr. Tamel's doing that. No offense, sir. You have a lot of time on other stuff you should be doing, number one. And number two is, if we fund them the correct infrastructure, they can do a quick report instantaneously. If IT put forward a request for infrastructure to do this, you can get that answer like that, on daily aggregate, on hourly aggregate, quarterly. So if you really want to know this stuff, there's tools and resources out there. I'll be more than willing to help anyone here show you what they cost. And I really wish that our IT director did put forth for this, because it'd make his day a lot easier.
I think that
Sorry,
it's
expensive, but you want real information, you need to be able.
One of the things that I've been researching since I've been here is that our tech director in this district is tasked primarily with handling hardware. The software end has been not managed as effectively as I would like to see it managed.
Fair, but the flat from year to year, there's reasons for that, which is obviously what I'm trying to say, take care of it.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mason. That did clarify your point. So certainly, if there was software that would help us, I would be very open to hearing about that.
Sure, yeah, there's plenty of stuff like
yeah.
Just another quick comment. The spreadsheet that Mr. Ambrose has referenced doesn't just include the software that teachers use with students in the classroom, but it includes a tremendous amount of software that we use to run the schools. So everything from MLP, which teachers log their professional development into, ASOP, which is the system that we use for personnel management and payroll and tracking substitute teachers, and it's an automatic calling system. Our Infinite Campus, which is a student information system, our gradebook. So we're talking about every piece of software that the district owns. What makes it more complicated is that some of this software that we purchased annually, Some we purchased on a 2-year plan, some on a 3-year plan, and I even found a piece of software that we use for interactive science that we purchased a 7-year subscription to. So tracking when all of that expires is very difficult, and we're going to have to map this out over not just a 1 or a 2-year plan, but probably a 10-year plan, because some of the software that we own we've purchased on multiple year subscriptions. So it's not as simple as it sounds, and it's a lot, as Mr. Ambrose said, a tremendous number of different types of software.
Just to sum that up, I think we could be more efficient about it, and we will be. I just want to be transparent about that. There is some inter-organizational efficiency that could be created, and certainly if there's software that would help us to track that, I'd love to learn more about it myself.
One more question related to that. In the budget item, in the proposed budget, that says online subscriptions, and it breaks it down by each school with a total of $107,536. Does that include access, or is that just subscriptions for the software?
I'd have to ask Michelle to answer that question. It's kind of a technical budget end question.
And for the most part, we kept some of those items flat funded for the very reason that Mr. Chamel was talking about earlier, that it will take some work to ensure that we're looking at all of the products and have a complete understanding of what's funded and how.
Okay, so whether it includes access or it's just subscriptions, we don't know right now.
I could not answer that question
Okay,
currently.
thank you.
Right.
That is part of the purpose of the very significant spreadsheet we're compiling.
Thanks.
Oh, I'm sorry, Karen, you got it.
No, I mean, I was going to go, actually, you took the deep road. I will take the very surface road of it seems like there's two different things. One is what Mr. Chamel is talking about, which is software that runs the systems for the school and for the teachers and things. But on a very low base level, I mean, it'd be very easy to do a quick inventory with the teachers for the things that the students are using.
Right.
Just classroom by classroom. That could be a 5-minute Google form. What are your kids using? How often do you use it?
Yep.
And then cross-reference with what has a cost. So that's.
And I think also we're trying to figure out what do we own versus what is actually being used.
Yeah.
I think your idea of surveying teachers
But I
would be
think,
really
because I know, I mean, any school district, there's things that people like and things they don't, and things that some people think they'll use and they end up not. So if there isn't a current assessment of that, that would be a very quick thing to find out quite quickly as far as what the teachers are actually using with the kids.
I think we'll do that. That's a great idea. Thank you for sharing. Mr. Tamel, can you remind me tomorrow we should do a survey? All right. We are on to PLC. Sorry, I lost my spot. Is the PLC leader part of the CBA? And is this done on an hourly rate or a stipend? How many in each school? And is there a job description or explanation of responsibilities? The answer is yes. PLC team leader is part of the CBA, and it stipulates the team leaders are paid a stipend of $1,500 per year for their duties, and the number of leaders varies by the school based on the number of grade level or discipline specific teams. I did not alter the question because it was asked as a PLC, but we will change that to professional learning community before the slides are posted tomorrow.
And collective bargaining agreement.
And collective bargaining. Collective bargaining agreement, I think, is the actual, thank you, Andy.
Yeah.
We're happy to do that. We keep catching them.
And how often do the PLCs meet?
It depends on the school. Each school has a schedule. Would you like me to have them report out at each school?
Sure.
Baby Hall.
Teachers meet officially with the PLC twice a month, sometimes 3 days plus an hour every Wednesday or first week.
They meet once a month, 3 times a month on Wednesdays, but they also meet during the week, also during their team time.
That's partly because they have a team structure, so they can, yep.
3 times a week, or 3 times a month, and then also sometimes, other times during the month.
As a follow-up, I would say that's absolutely true. There are the official meetings, after school, but many of our PLCs meet.
Right.
Mr. Ambrose, the high school is between 2 and 3 times per week.
Okay, the high school's meeting 2 or 3 times per week.
So I just wanted clarification on that, because to be the leader of any group that's meeting with a frequency of 3 to 4 times a month to multiple times a week, as the high school is saying, that stipend is very tiny for the amount of aggravation and preparation that goes in for the teacher that's leading it.
Thank you very
to provide
much.
some context for people that haven't participated in that.
Okay, so we are moving on to the next question, which is a pretty big one. I'm going to read the whole question and try to help you with the answer. Please advise the cost to have a group like NESDEC perform a study on student needs and facility use for the projected future. Where would the money come from for such a study? Is there a line item, or do we need to create one in the proposed budget? Per the study, uploaded cost per pupil elementary based on schools in New Hampshire, 400 to 600 students. Sourced from the Department of Education FY 15-16, Sanborn spends about $3,000 per pupil more than the average, while paying our teaching staff lower than average pay. This translates to about $1.5 million. Why is this money being spent that is different from other districts? What benefits the student outcomes if they are the result, if any are the result? Please note that it does not appear to be a result of allocation of cost to elementary as opposed to district-wide expenses, since the $1.5 million is roughly equivalent to the cost above average from a district-wide analysis of comparably sized districts. So, okay, just to be totally honest, there's no way that we can analyze all of these districts, know all their expenses, and tell you why that is exactly the way it is. That would require manpower that we don't even remotely have at the central office here. Having someone like NASDAQ come in, so we did look at that. Per very preliminary discussions, the cost would be in the vicinity of $24,000 to $28,000. In general, they suggested two phases. One's a starting point, which is a demographic study to project future student enrollment, which, by the way, when I checked the numbers for this year in my previous slide, it was off by 1 student. We had NESDEC do a study a number of years ago, and it was I was just shocked that it was that close. What I might be luck, I don't know, but it was pretty impressive. The cost is $6,250 for that, and it would take 2 to 3 months to complete. And second, a facilities best use study to look at building level configurations, and the estimated cost is between $17,000 and $22,000. This does not include an in-depth architectural or engineering study. The amount would need to be added to the budget and approved by the school board, and this type of data cannot be compiled without a detailed study. So the person who put this question in, I understand what they're saying. I'm not comfortable validating to you as a board and a BudCom today that that $300,000 number is accurate. We have not been able to assess that. Okay, we are totally willing to ask the question. Because if there's a way that we can find $3,000, $1.5 million, that pays for slides 2 and 3, right? So I'm certainly totally happy to find that kind of money. But I think it's so important to recognize that student funding is incredibly complex. Our class sizes might be slightly smaller or higher. I don't know what's going on with special education costs. All those things have to be considered. They have to be completely analyzed and considered for our district, and then they would need to be compiled and analyzed for all the comparable districts with the exact same metrics. So I just want everyone to know that. That's a very complex process. Even NESDEC can't analyze 12 other districts for us. They can just tell us what we have and what the best thing is to do for us. So I just want to kind of put that one out there, that's a very complex analysis to do effectively. I do think that we should look at what we have for resources and analyze our budgets and continue to work to pare things down in areas that could be pruned and grow things in areas that are very, very weak, such as our professional development lines. That is a process that we need to do, and we, as I said at the beginning of this presentation, that's at this point for this team who's just begun working together, it's going to take a couple of years to really get through all of that, but we have some very specific plans for next year that I'll talk about later.
Question kind of going to the funding of, roughly $25,000. First of all, is there a potential line item, I guess this is for Michelle, that could be used for that if the board were able to find that money this year? And secondly, if not, then, perhaps that's something that we ought to be looking at adding to the budget. So I wonder if there is a line item that could be used, is it possible the board could approve that?
Could certainly look at the budget and see where we may be able to make some adjustments if it were to be considered for this year, or what we might want to do if it were to be added as an item for next year's budget. So I could come back with some information for the board to consider.
That's great, because looking at it from a standpoint of an ROI, $25,000 to find out where we might be spending potentially as much as $1.5 million, which may or may not have great outcomes for our kids. I mean, it could be that it's the wisest money we could possibly spend, but the thing is, we don't know. We're just kind of guessing, and in the meantime, we're spending money and we have huge needs. So I'd really like to see that happen. Thank you.
I agree with Ms. Collier. I had actually put this in my list of goals for this year as we're planning the middle school renovations or a new building.
All right. Question. Beatty has $7,500 budgeted for enrichment funds, and Memorial only has $2,500. Why such a discrepancy? The answer is Memorial only budgets for the artist in residence. Other enrichment activities are provided to Memorial students through the PTO. Beatty budgets for artist in residence for the whole school and provides specific grade level enrichment opportunities throughout the year. This is an example of the need for our team to look at equity in budgeting. Travel line of $1,050. Do specific teachers get this, and do they put in vouchers for reimbursement? CBA Article 12.8 stipulates that members who are required to use their personal automobiles to travel between professional assignments in the course of a single day shall receive mileage reimbursement compensation at the current IRS rate. The number 21 in the budget code indicates that this line is to pay Beatty teachers who travel, but it's true for all 4 schools.
So this is done on a reimbursement basis? Thank you.
Just to comment, the IRS reimbursement rate has dropped this year from last year. Might save you some money.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
I'm sure Michelle's right on it.
Okay.
One thing I love about working with Michelle is she is meticulous. So the library salaries are up 5 to 5.5% on average, except at Memorial, where it is up 8.26%. Why is this particular increase greater than the others, including at the high school where the salary is lower? Budgeted unfilled position for retired Memorial School librarian at M6. We hired the new person at M7 with budgeted 18-19 as M8. So really it's just someone left and we hired someone at more expensive. And I think probably could have said it that way. We have a whole team of people answering these questions, so.
Does that create more equity issues between your schools?
No, because we budget any open position at an M6, but we hire the best possible candidate every time. And that's something that as the leader of the organization, I feel very strongly about. We can get experienced, good people in there, that we want to do it. If we can bring right out of school really good people in there, we want to do it. I want the best person, the smartest, brightest, hardest working person. We'll teach them what they need to know if we've got holes in the system. All right? Outside professional and student services, or student services, which are competitively bid. The answer is specially ed. And you kind of spoken, you guys, if someone here wants to talk, be like, hey, because I can't see you very well, so, but just feel free to chime in a couple times, and this, I just want Michael just to, okay? Sure. Because these next few pages are gonna, I need them to speak to some of these things when you ask specific questions. I know I'd like to know it all, but we're getting there. Special education contracted services are not competitively bid, except transportation, when a request for proposals, RFP, is completed. There is a shortage of related service providers, and schools do not typically put out bids as it's already hard enough to find qualified providers. We go through agencies when we need to secure related service providers. If more than one agency has qualified individuals, we pick the one best suited for the position and the lowest cost if appropriate. Usually, we struggle to find a person. So that's a really fancy way to say if we need someone for speech and language therapy at a building because we can't get someone to do it, we'll be lucky if we get somebody. I know that some of these answers are technical, but we knew that they were going to go on the web, so we wanted them to be very, very clear. Mr. Swayze.
Does this not violate the school district's bid policy?
I have never worked anywhere that sent out special services to bid, but we could certainly look into that.
That was not my question.
You asked me if it broke the policy.
Yes.
I said I don't know. We'd have to.
You don't know?
We would have to look into it.
If I could comment on that, I believe the bid policy does say that bids will be presented where practical. And in this particular case, there really isn't, the solutions or the service agencies are very limited. It's not as though we're going to get a lot of response on competitive bids for those types of services.
Who determines what's practical?
Thanks.
Well, in this particular case.
Not this case, just how you determine what's practical.
Sometimes
You know?
sometimes I would say that sometimes it's dependent on if you have a single source vendor, so you might have a particular item that you can only get from one particular vendor, and therefore to go out to bid would be changing, for instance, like a control system for a building. If you competitively bid it in some cases, you might get a product that's completely incompatible with what you're currently utilizing. So that might be a situation where you have a single source vendor. In this particular case, we're talking about personnel that in many situations would be looking to hire staff, but there aren't any staff available, so you have to go to an agency that has staff, you can almost think of it as like a temp agency that would support you by having their staff come and work for you for those services. So there aren't a lot of agencies that provide that particular service. So we're limited in terms of who can provide the services. And even in that case, when you go to those agencies, these areas are areas that there are very limited staff available in general. They are, in many cases, critical shortage areas, and so we're competing with everybody else who's looking for the same service.
In addition, there are times where you have to fill a need very quickly due to federal and state regulations for students. You don't have time to go through a formal bid process. If you have a student that has been determined through an IAP process needs a speech and language therapist, and you don't have any time in the schedules of your current therapist, you may have to immediately seek through an agency who has availability much sooner than an RFP process.
In that particular case, complying with the requirement to provide the service is going to trump that process of going out to competitively bid.
So you could produce for me a law that says within 20 days you have to produce this, or what?
Sometimes it's in a day or two.
Yeah.
There's a law that says that?
Yeah, when a student has it's a student's individual education plan, and it's written into the plan, that plan is binding.
Yeah.
And as soon as the parent signs off on that,
I'd like Mr. Swayze to submit his questions for the 30th, and he'll submit them. We'll answer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Policy DJ.
You're gonna get a bunch of
for that.
Well, special ed is for Thursday.
I already answered. Right, I'm asking, we're happy to answer it, but I'd like it submitted in time so that we can answer. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. The technology department noted that new switches are needed. Please define this need and please describe what is replaced, the expected life, the advantages and disadvantages of new switches, and the cost of any potential savings. The age of the current switches in the district are 8 to 10 years. This means that they are currently end of life and no longer supported or updated. Newer devices require the next generation of switches for power and connectivity. As the role of the network increases, the switches play a critical role in being able to manage the network and implement new technologies. The current switch backbone is running, but as any hardware ages, the chance of malfunctions increase. So I'd like to put this into layman's terms. Bob said I can make it work for one more year. Scotty, I'll keep the ship running. Right? So it's like he's doing a great job of saying we could probably make it one more year, guys, and then we're going to have to replace it.
One part of this question is about the cost for switches, and I don't see the answer.
I'm sorry. Bob? I think it was in the original budget request, which is why it wasn't put in there. It was $20,000 or so.
It was $30,000.
is to provide roughly between 30 and 40 switches throughout the schools. They will be bought on the used market, so they're used switches. That's why we can get them at the price we're getting.
And used switches would have what kind of life expectancy?
These switches, a lot of these switches that we have now were used switches. We purchased a lot of our equipment on the used market because we're able to get the same warranty now with the way technology and equipment is moving from companies and being dropped down. We're able to get fairly new equipment with the same warranties at roughly half the price.
Okay, so if you were to replace 30 to 40 switches for $30,000, would that be something that would be an expense 7 years out again, or is it something that, can you phase it in?
We can do anything. We have phased it in. We have piecemealed it over the years. This request has never gone in before in bulk. We have phased this in over the years as we've grown. As we've grown access points, cameras, those type of things, they all plug into a switch in the closet that ends up giving it connectivity to the network. So as we add equipment, we have added switches as we can. This is the new generation of switches, all right, which requires, in other words, new cameras, new APs, HVAC equipment, that all requires a new power connectivity called PoE+, which is power over Ethernet. Okay, and that brings power to the device, and the next generation requires a different type of switch. We can keep running what is running, but what I'm trying to say, in other words, in a switch is 2 or 3 fans. And if we have 30 or 40 switches throughout the district, we don't know when a fan dies. And then when the fan dies, eventually the switch dies. So that's why they're running now, but I can't tell you how many will be running in the morning.
Would it be possible, and I just don't understand the technology, would it be possible to replace X number of the 30 to 40 and operate with the rest of them and kind of phase it in over time? Is that?
We just can't guarantee that. This is my network manager, Scott.
We've been doing that for a long time now. And the problem that we have now, we have 3 or 4 different series or generations of switches that all behave differently. So they don't really work well together from a management perspective. The other thing is when you have closets interconnected, by using the same generation of switch, you're able to connect them at similar speeds as well as have predictable management so that when you have deploying cameras in a building, one end of the building is going to behave the same way as the other end of the building because the technology supports all of that. And right now, the high school runs on one series of switches because I was able to upgrade them here with used equipment. Memorial is on a different generation, middle school is on a different generation. So it's becoming kind of a management nightmare.
That's why I really like that.
So the goal with this now is to bring everything up to the latest technology. Used switches are roughly about a year old. They come out of big business, they can afford to buy it new and dump it on the used market. I lost track of my original thought.
Well, my question, would it cause a greater nightmare if you were to replace, say, 20% of the switches? If we were to put that in the budget and plan over 5 years to have a replacement?
Well, what we're doing though is we're buying on the used market. So availability is a big question when you're buying on the used market. In other words, I don't know, right, if we okay $30,000, I can't tell you I can buy 30 switches. We've gotten prices for those switches now, and there's availability, but that doesn't mean we have one vendor that supplies us those switches with warranties at a certain cost. But I don't know if I buy 20 of them this year, I don't know that I'm going to have 20 next year that are definitely going to be a year older, and the warranty will probably not be the same for those. So if we're buying new, of course, but we're going to pay at least double or sometimes triple for new switches.
Okay,
So
thank you. Thank you.
Just regarding the warranty, do you happen to know when you buy this equipment, how long the warranty has to run?
Yes,
I have.
the warranty that we're getting with them right now is 1 year.
Okay.
It costs to go to like a 2 or 3 year warranty. Because the switches are so inexpensive, it becomes to be about half the price of the switch.
Right.
So the way we operate now is we buy with a 1 year warranty is included, and we keep a spare of each model. So if we had a failure, we'd have something we can put in.
Thank you.
About how many devices will this be impacting district-wide?
Well, we've already upgraded nodes.
No. How many nodes are connecting through these devices? 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000?
We have roughly 2,500 devices.
Okay, stop right there.
No, wire devices?
How many devices, you're replacing infrastructure on the back end, so there's 2,500 or so devices?
Yes, we're talking about mainly access points that then support wireless devices, so.
For which at one given point, there's a couple hundred kids in that auditorium during weekend events
So,
that you.
Total devices connected to the network, peaks at around 3,000.
Okay, all right, so what you just told me then is 30,000, divide that by 3,000. Calculator tells me it's $10 per device. Divide that by 3 years, you're saying $3 a device per year. This is a really small budget line item to have this much discussion, especially when infrastructure costs like $500,000 to replace if we want to be cutting edge and always on.
The new cost of these switches is about $3,500. We're getting them with the warranty for about $1,300.
Okay then, so you just said it's a less than a fifth that we're getting.
I'll use this platform to just speak. The reason that Scott is so excited about this, okay, is because, okay, we have piecemealed the network where funds have been available. This is an example of technology, the technology department trying to be proactive instead of reactive. We have been reactive pretty much since I've been here because we have had to keep things running until they break. Okay, this is actually asking to replace something that's running because it's outdated.
Technology is like
we don't replace anything unless it breaks.
Technology is a fifth utility. Lights always have to be on, computers always have to be on.
Just in closing, I would agree with Corey that, we talked in those first few slides about the needs for professional development and intervention for kids. Technology is the nervous system of the school department. If it goes down, we're not doing business. So I do think that I was very grateful when Bob said, I had mixed feelings, I guess is the way I put it. I appreciated Bob's team effort to put the switches on the cutting block at the time that we had at the 11th hour for this budget. It's something that I certainly am glad that people are asking about, because keeping the technology up and running keeps things smooth for the kids. Really.
I have a question about more on the funding side, because as I recall from I believe it was from last year, end of last year, the technology department had some requests that the facilities committee brought forward, and they were funded not from the operating budget, but from funds that come into us. We have some sort of fund that, from organizations that rent our facilities when we're not using them. Is that correct? Do you recall what I'm talking about? I believe it was facilities. Were you here then? Michelle, were you here?
I think that Matt Angel had talked with folks about that prior to my joining the district. I don't know, Bob, if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, from what I, Matt Angel.
Feel free to come up and talk.
I'd rather be there. We're back when we got it.
Okay, all right.
Matt Angel found a fund that was being funded with use of facilities funds that we take in, I believe, and this is all just speaking from memory, that was a pool of money that could only be used for technology. And Matt asked us if we had a use for it. We currently have what we call 3 nodes in the district. There's a node here, there's a node at the Main Street and Bakey location, and then there's a node at the Newton facility. These are clusters of servers that we purchased. And what we asked for was to replace one cluster of that. We replaced the cluster here with the switches that were here for the high school. We still have 2 main clusters, but we did pull that from a pool that I had when I talked to Matt, that came from monies that were taken in from facilities. I believe there are still funds in there, yes.
That's my recollection, exactly what you're describing is what I believe was described to us at the end of last year. And I'm just wondering if that pool must be accumulating.
Replenishing or something.
Yeah, exactly. So is there, how much is in there? And is it just sort of accumulating? Has it been dedicated to any other purpose? Can we use it for this? That's my question.
We certainly can research that. Thank you for asking. It would be great if we could do that. I'll have Michelle take a look at it.
We'll add that to the list of questions.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks for the creative problem solving. Appreciate it. I think there was one last question on this page 14. Can tuition pre-K opt in for transportation and at what cost? The district is required by law to provide services to preschool students with IEPs. Preschool is open to other families at a lottery and parents provide transportation.
Question, that doesn't really answer the question.
Sure.
Is it available to these kids who tuition in to be able to pay to have their kids take the bus with the IEP students?
No, there's no obligation to provide transportation for preschool students.
I'm not talking about an obligation, Jody, I was talking about an option.
We've never done that before. You can certainly look at it, but again, it's not a requirement. And I don't know of any other school district that does it.
Okay. It seems to me that it might be possible as an inducement. It's my understanding that, first of all, that the 50-50 match is difficult to get between tuition and IEP students, and that's what the law asks for. And secondly, parents transporting their kids, it might be a very attractive thing if they could pay for a bus to take their kids instead of having to drive them and drop them when they have other things that they have going on, maybe babies at home or whatever. So it would be really great to know what the actual cost might be and see if it might be an option that could be offered.
Well, some of it would probably depend on numbers of enrollment as well, if you're going to be looking at it, and the enrollment numbers constantly change.
Mm-hmm. I understand they're variables, but it would be good to see if we could come up with something. It's just a suggestion.
Thank you very much for the suggestion. Please detail the total number of supplies, number of students, and cost per student for the past 4 years at each of Beakey and Memorial. So this chart answers that question.
Thank you that you're going to be looking into this.
Yep, we are looking into all kinds of things, folks. Just getting started. Is there a comparable reduction in library books and textbooks? Reductions have been done based on building need, and in the future, we are planning to equalize these amounts based on a per student allocation. I'm just going to take a minute to reemphasize a very, very important point. In the areas of special education, regular education, facilities, and technology, we do not have reserve accounts. I don't dare to cut this budget any more than what was proposed at the board's request at my last presentation. I wouldn't dare to say to the teachers, hey, the principals, hey, let's take a look at our book lines and make a per pupil allocation for this next year. I am totally comfortable doing that for the budget for next fall, a year from now. So what we did was we looked at staffing levels, class sizes, and places that we could make reductions to bring in $1 million worth of cuts. Going any deeper than that this year would make me very, very anxious. Because we just don't, we have a very skilled, probably the finest team I've ever worked with. But they are green in this organization. And that merits, if they weren't cautious, I wouldn't think that they were good at what they do. If you're cautious, you know when to hold on. That's a sign that people are doing a really good job. So I just want to be clear that my folks have been very clear that they've looked at their lines and done what they felt like they could do for this year. We need to reallocate and look at all of that for next year. I'm sorry. Any questions on that? Okay. Full-time speech pathologist. Is this for Memorial only? Is this new? How many in the district? If this is a change, how is it now handled? Memorial lost their speech and language pathologist who was hired through collective bargaining agreement, CBA, prior to the beginning of the 16-17 school year. The district wasn't able to find another qualified applicant for a teacher's salary, so we contracted for one and have stayed with that provider due to the quality of her work. The SLPs are a critical shortage area. Memorial has one full-time contracted SLP, plus another contracted SLP for 1 day a week. This year it was 2 days per week, so the needs have decreased, so we've decreased that amount. At this time, that doesn't mean it could go up. Preschool has one full-time SLP through the collective bargaining agreement, and Beatty has one full-time collective bargaining agreement SLP and one contracted SLP 2 days a week. The middle school has one full-time collective bargaining agreement SLP and one contracted SLP 1 day a week. The high school has one full-time CBA SLP. So let me just kind of help you out with that a little bit. This is all IEP driven, and typically the needs are more at the elementary level. My little boy had a speech impediment for a while, had an IEP, got his speech services, and then he was out, right? Because once they learn the articulation and the formation of the letters, they're done with that service. There are some needs at the high school, so it would be logical that the bulk of the support would be at the lower elementary and then getting less and less as we go up. So I just thought it'd be important to recognize that it says speech and language, but it really is a lot of work on the actual ability to speak, the technical skill of forming letters and sounds. Typically, the criteria that defines whether or not a student needs that is whether or not they're intelligible to the adults around them and the other kids. Jody, did I do okay with that?
Yes.
All right, thanks. Special ed's a very interesting, complex topic. All right, may I move on to the next? All right. How long on average is a student kept in ESL, English as a second language? How many now, a 3-year trend, and a cost per the ESL student? Most ELL, English language learners, students reach academic English language proficiency between 5 and 7 years. The goal in our ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act state plan, is 5 years. However, there are students in this district that have been in the program from K through high school. Every student is different, so reaching academic English proficiency would vary. There are currently 10 identified ELL students in the district. Last year at this time there were 11. Last year 3 new students moved into the district after January. The cost would take into account the ESOL, English for speakers of other languages, teacher salary, plus the line items in the budget for supplies and travel as she travels between the buildings to support students. The district has also joined a Title III consortium grant to receive supplemental funding for additional supplies.
Can you explain more about that grant?
So I have to give you the specific numbers, but depending on your populations, you can get grant funding for ELL students. This district does not have enough ELL students to meet criteria for their own grant. So we have joined other smaller districts, and then basically it is determined per child how much money is dispersed, and then depending on how many students you have within the district, you get that per pupil expense, which I can get you that for the 30th if you want more additional information on that. So I believe there are 4 other districts in the consortium right now. I have to double check that as well. The ESOL teacher has really taken the role in that this year. I was involved more with it last year, but she's the one that works with the students on a day-to-day basis. She's the one that can really advocate for the district's needs. So she's been the one that has been attending those quarterly meetings this year. So she'd be the best person to answer any specific questions of what those conversations look like. But that's kind of the process with the grant itself. We're just not large enough to be able to have our own grant, but we still get limited money. It's only probably about $3,000, don't quote me on that. I could certainly get you the exact figure again. It really only helps out the supplemental, and there's a requirement in the grant that it has to be supplemental. It cannot take the place of required services.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just want to make a quick comment, if I could, about grant seeking. Obviously, moving into my position this year, I'm seeing the world from a different lens. And I'm just amazed at how much work is put in this district behind the scenes, actually actively seeking alternative sources of funding. As Mr. Ambrose alluded to earlier, one of the areas of shortfall that we've had is around professional development. So we're always hustling, looking for opportunities. Recently, there was an opportunity that came across our desk for public infrastructure funds from the state of New Hampshire, roughly $19 million to support infrastructure projects in schools. And so in a very short amount of time, we put together over $500,000 worth of grants to try to supplement our budget with outside sources of money. So I'm just incredibly impressed, and I think you should know how hard the administrators in particular in this district work hunting down and actually going through the process of seeking grant funding to help to offset the taxpayers' burden.
Make a comment. It is, I believe, something that's in, this is addressed to the school board, I believe it's in your adopted strategic plan to seek a grant writer who would be recompensed based on the grants that they got, so it wouldn't actually cost the district anything. And I would encourage you folks to pursue that. Thank you.
Pre-K cost per student versus tuition charge for Memorial Bakey. Please remove the special services and transportation for the IEP pre-K students in this calculation. Tuition for preschool is $165 a month or $1,650 a year for the morning 3-year-old class, or $200 a month or $2,000 a year for the afternoon 4-year-old class. Each program has 3 part-time paras and 1 teacher plus a shared collective bargaining agreement occupational therapy coordinator and shared speech and language pathologist and 1 part-time contracted physical therapist. Students with disabilities do not pay tuition. Those services are IEP-driven services or outcome.
Okay, this was my question, and so perhaps it's not clear enough, but what I was looking for is, does that $165 a month or the $200 a month actually cover the costs for those students, or is it less than their costs, and it might be a selling point for people if it is actually less?
That rate has been set for years, and I don't even know if Michelle can answer that question because that really dates back to Carol as far as the rates. We haven't looked at changing rates for a while. I would imagine that those are low based off of salaries. It is a very limited amount of money for the services that are being provided in that classroom. The morning session is 2.5 hours. The afternoon session is 3 hours. Again, student population and enrollment always varies in there. But there was a comparable kind of analysis looked at from small districts several years ago with this question. Other districts started looking at the cost of tuition as well. I could probably gather some of that information, but it's not accessible through a lot of districts. I can reach out to some that have done it before possibly, but I believe our figures are still on the average to below average range for tuition.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Broderick, can we have a 5-minute break? We've been at this for 2 hours and I need a little break.
Any objections? 5-minute
Take
break?
5 minutes.
Okay.
Next question, has there been a cost savings in books now that students have one-to-one implementation of technology? The formula for that question that was presented is cost per pupil for each school with the 3-year history plus projections for FY 2018-19, and then divide the total on books per school spent from the prior budget FY16 books by the number of students in that year, the total spent in FY 2017 pre-audit actual, and divide by the number of students budgeted money, divided by the number of students in FY18, and then proposed FY19 budgeted by the expected, okay, I'm going home. Just kidding. I met with Andy to talk about this one because we were like, huh? So I just wanted to read it for fun. I just wanted to see if Pete would stop me. The answer is, our plan is definitely to analyze these district expenses of software, books, supplies, and materials, as I discussed earlier in this presentation. We recognize that there's more work to do, but we need time to process it. We are going to ask the community to allow us to analyze per pupil costs, which is partly the NASDAQ study, but also just literally us putting together all this information and combing through it over the next 6 or 8 months before the next budget presentation. Having said that, if you go to the next page, there is a slide that gives you where it stands today, right? So if you look at the supplies for Bakey School, Memorial School, and the middle school, and then the books and periodicals for each school, I would say that that's at least the figures to give you a place to look. Now, Annie made it clear to us when we met with her that there had been a conversation previously by the board and the previous administration that theoretically, if you had one-to-one implementation of laptops and computers, that the cost for books and paper and things would go down. I want to make sure you all know, I don't know if that's going to happen in the end, but that does not reflect the philosophy of the current leadership. The philosophy of the current leadership is that at the K6 or K5 level, kids need to have books in hand. They need to use technology to augment their learning to prepare them for the future. Are you guys taking apart our devices?
Yeah.
It's okay.
PDAs or whatever you call
Got my PDA. Isn't that a public display of affection? So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that as we move forward in the future, thank you. As we move forward in the future, that it goes back to that initial point of if resources were unlimited. I visited the Bakey School and teachers in groups of 4 or 5 to meet with them in their professional learning communities. Their classroom libraries are very, very limited. Very limited. I was honestly very concerned. But before I bring to you a proposal of adding significant money to provide books to kids in the elementary level, I need to do a more detailed analysis of the budget, so that will be a future item to be discussed. So I just want to make sure that you understand philosophically that reading for young children, especially with a book in hand, where they can write a note about their thinking, their predicting, and what the character might do or what they think is going to happen, comprehension, that all needs to happen with real books in kids' hands. Okay, and we have some concerns about that, but we also have some pretty healthy libraries in the schools. So we have to balance figuring out what's in the school library versus what's in the direct classroom library for instruction in different genres, which includes science, social studies, so they need to be able to read about science, they need to be able to write about science, they need to be able to read about social studies, they need to be able to write about social studies, and then they need to be able to do writing and reading about their own experiences, right? Which for little kids we call short stories or small moments. Those are just the seeds of this work that's going to move our achievement up the ladder, but it's going to take some time to get there. So I just wanted you all to see these numbers, and please be cautious about drawing correlations with these numbers. There's still a lot of work to do on these numbers. Any other questions? Okay. Why the big increase at Memorial with Chromebooks? How are these broken down by grade and subject, and are any of these consumables? What are the trends in books versus technology? The cost of books decreasing with the increase in technology costs for Memorial. The note says that the principal requested to increase $15,539, but the district amount on this page indicates $6,338. Can you explain this discrepancy? This is part of the 5-year capital plan, and the principal needs the books, but it's not an increase. The answer is the district will be looking at the per pupil cost for books, supplies, software, and other items in the future. The FY19 request for books for Memorial looks like an increase because the budget proposed for FY18 was cut significantly from what was requested by the principal. Please see the information below. So the FY18 principal's request was $13,731. It was cut by $7,393, and so the approved budget was $6,338, and it was insufficient. So basically, the business manager had to go last year, prior to our arrival here, and add money back into that line. So it looks like a big increase from year to year, but the reality is that it was funded at a much higher level this year because it had to be. Is that accurate, Michelle?
That is correct.
We had to meet a long time to get to that, just so you all know. Thought you'd like to know that. All right, here we go. Oh, wait, any questions? I didn't see any hands. Pam?
I had mentioned at your first presentation that there was something about replacement of Chromebooks as one of the budget items, and I had wondered why, because they're fairly durable.
Yeah.
And we just started that program.
Does that pertain to this specific question? Because I might have answered it later.
It's kind of related because you're talking about
okay, Bob.
Chromebooks.
Well, Which one, are you asking about the why the big increase at Memorial with Chromebooks? Would you like me to have Bob speak to that, Pam?
I'm just looking for my question, but.
I think Bob knows the answer. Why don't we let him?
The word replacement was used, and I'd emailed you about that.
Yeah, it was an email, yes. The purchase of Chromebooks for the freshmen every year goes under the replacement plan. So it's not replacing Chromebooks, it's the purchase of new ones for the freshmen every year. That was the cost for that line item. But it's under the replacement plan line or budget. But I think that's what we're referring to.
So is this a one-shot purchase?
It's a yearly annual thing. Every time the freshmen come in,
They're not going to be handed off to incoming freshmen?
there's a plan that you'd have to talk to Mr. Stack about on what he's going to have seniors do with the Chromebooks. Essentially, the life of a Chromebook, if we get it to run 4 years, we ought to all get a pat on the back.
Okay.
Because we're paying $200 per device for those.
So
if
it's-
seniors have running Chromebooks, then as a reward for keeping them running, my advice would be let them have them.
I see, thank you so much.
That's a really good question, and I just want to emphasize that Chromebooks do not have the life expectancy of a laptop. They are not a laptop. They look like a laptop, but they're designed for browsing the web. They don't have the depth or the hardware to be maintained long-term. Thanks, Bob. That was really helpful. All right, so slide 21. We are getting there, folks. Question: what happens if the copier and telecom and supplies are not appropriated for FY 18-19? Please describe the agreement renewals, whether contracted or not, benefits and cost savings. Are these new? What is the increase and why? If so, what has been the impact of each? For example, the $10,500 cut in copiers, does this mean each school has fewer copiers? $8,500 to telecom. What service was eliminated this year with these cuts, and what will be achieved with this increase? Well, first of all, anything that was cut, we cut $985,000, 900 and whatever, $950,000 roughly. I'm just estimating. So it didn't get, nothing was done with that money. It just goes away. But the phones and copiers will not be operational if they're not appropriated. Both copier and telecom lines are budgeted by actual expenditures for the previous 3 years and budgeting to cover the highest of the 3 years. Part of the copier lines is the lease agreement, which is $32,000 per year. The remainder of this line is per copy costs across the district. The amount budgeted to these lines, for this year is $10,000 less than last year's proposed amount. Any shortfalls in this line would need to be covered by other lines unknown at this time. Telecom costs are budgeted the same as the above and contain local and long-distance charges and any repair costs for telecom hardware. The amount budgeted for these lines this year is $8,500 less than requested in the proposed budget. Any shortfall will need to be covered by other lines. But it's really important to recognize, folks, we just had a long conversation about printing to color copiers and for kids to be printing to certain devices, and we're trying to maximize our efficiency of, just flat out using paper. Right, especially for grades 7 through 12, that a lot of times we're using paper when you could save it as a PDF and email it to someone, right? So it's a bigger conversation about the amount of printed paper that's being used as an organization, with the caveat that we did identify that there's some pretty significant use of color copiers and printers, where if you print the page to a photocopying machine, it's way less expensive. So that's just the beginning of looking at efficiency around paper. I grew up in a mill town, and it breaks my heart to say it, but paper is going away fast. It is. And I don't always love it, because I love kids to have books in their hands that they can read. But the reality is that my youngest son, he looks at paper and he's like, Dad, why do we have that? What's that for? He just swipes the page on the iPad and goes to the next thing. He knows what he's doing. So it's just a step along an evolutionary path that I don't always love, but I think that the reality is that we're printing, and it costs a lot of money to print to a printer versus a photocopier. So we're looking at trying to create efficiencies in that area. Page 22, question, do children rent musical equipment or is it all supplied to them by the district taxpayers? Do parents of students contribute to the cost of musical instruments? And are instruments rented or purchased? The answer is that we have an agreement for children to rent standard instruments such as flutes, clarinets, saxophones, trumpets, and trombones. The Sanborn Regional School District owns and provides students with non-standard instruments such as percussion, tuba, tenor and baritone, sax, etc. This is a standard practice for school districts. Just so everybody knows, my wife's a middle school music teacher. That's the way it rolls. We buy the big stuff, like if somebody wants to play timpani, the district would own a timpani, but if somebody wants to play saxophone, their family would usually rent to own. So I did run this by our music teachers just to make sure that it wasn't much different from Maine, but my car is a roving music studio. So I have frequently trumpet, saxophones, and trombones in the back of my car that go to kids. So it's important to note that parents are contributing quite a bit to this cost. Okay, yep.
Can I add to this that the Sanborn Seminary Board of Trustees over the years has purchased a lot of musical equipment for the school district?
We really appreciate that.
No, I wasn't looking for a thank you, but
no, it's expensive,
there has been
though.
a need there, and we've helped out with it a lot.
Thank you.
I think we bought the tuba. I know we bought the drum. I forget what else we always support that.
Thank you. It's very expensive.
Yes.
Can I also make a comment? I was the former Music Boosters president, and the Music Booster organization is a district-wide organization, and they purchase musical instruments too for the different schools, mostly the middle school and the high school.
Thank you, Tammy.
That's a pretty active parent group. So.
Thank you. Those efforts are greatly appreciated. Instruments are extremely expensive. Someone asked, why are there only 60 professional learning communities, schools in the USA? What benefit is there of being two of these 60? And what costs are there associated with being a PLC school? And please define a PLC. So we did all that. A PLC is defined as a professional learning community. In a professional learning community, teachers are organized into groups in order to collectively conduct the business of teaching and learning, including collaborative design of curriculum, instruction, assessment, grading practices, intervention, etc. There are standards established for becoming a model PLC school. These standards are incredibly rigorous and difficult to attain. And just to note, I didn't write this response, someone else did. I was shocked to see that we are one of the districts that has this rating as a PLC school. It's absolutely fantastic and should be included as an indicator of success for our organization. This is a very difficult, when Mr. Tamel writes rigorous, that's putting it lightly. The low number of model schools in the country is not based on a lack of desire in becoming a model school. Rather, the low number indicates the difficulty in attaining the status. To be a model school is considered a high honor. So and I just have to say that it goes along with the core belief that if teachers are working together to solve problems to help kids, we're on the right path. The next step is to align everything else we do to what the teachers say they need. Okay? Yeah. Pam?
So I just think we need to be careful of using language that's vague and fluffy, but not tied to specific outcomes, such as considered a high honor. In another response to the same question, we have that's rigorous process, and the benefit of becoming a model PLC school comes from the focus on teaching and learning and the inherent benefits of acknowledgement that we are running a school of high quality. Now, I don't know what an inherent benefit is, but I do know good school test scores, okay? And this is the kind of language, vague language, inherent benefits, and high honor that has really is not conducive to popular support for some of the programs. We need to tie the PLC, which I support. I don't think teachers communicate with each other enough, and they work together well when they share best practices, and it's great. But the language, it's just not conducive to gaining support for the programs. We need to make sure it's tied to specific outcomes, specific performance targets.
So can you clarify that for me? Because I'm thinking that maybe what we should do
I don't want to have high honors. I want my students to do well on the outcomes that we target.
But I think it's just important to recognize that.
Language needs to be
I'm
tied
going
to
to just
outcomes.
push back slightly on this because at our elementary levels, our community has 25% of our families have a bachelor's degree or higher, and more than 65% of our students are doing above the state average on assessments. That is impressive, and we need to celebrate that, along with some of the concerns that we have, which is that we want to have all of our kids reading at grade level by the end of third grade. But we're making huge progress because of the teachers' hard work. I would like to see us define rigorous and have a conversation about what that means. I didn't feel like we could do it in one little quick slide, but the criteria for being a model PLC school is very, very intense. And if you would like us to, I would be happy to have Michael Trammell do a presentation on what that means, because I think the community should understand that this is a very big honor. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm saying it needs to be tied to...
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that we need to show outcomes and not language.
And that's exactly why we're working as a community to define student success.
Okay.
Because I would beg to say that at the elementary level, our outcomes are very strong.
They are good, yes.
Yep, thank you. Taryn?
Just for people that aren't familiar with public schools, don't confuse this as meaning that there's only 60 schools in the country that are doing PLCs. Most public schools in the country have PLCs regularly for their teachers. We're a model school for PLC, just like you can have a child care center, but only a small amount of child care centers are NAEYC accredited. It's like a special delineation for meeting certain criteria. So just for people that aren't familiar with public schools, don't misinterpret this to mean that there's only 60 schools in the country running a PLC program. Most schools in the country have a PLC program. It's just that only 60 are recognized as places with a program that other people would come and study for implementation in their own schools.
Thank you. That is very accurate. What are the benefits of being accredited by NEASC? There are only 5 elementary schools, so why are there only 5 elementary schools so accredited? And is this in the US or New England or New Hampshire, and what are the costs? I'm just going to read this answer. Again, Mr. Trammell, it's pretty long. The NEASC process is one of peer review, where member schools, administrators, teachers review the Sanborn learning community against its 7 standards. NEASC provides recommendations and commendations and ultimately accreditation. Accreditation is one measure of school quality as considered by outside institutions like colleges and universities. NEASC stands for the New England Association of Schools and Colleges and is therefore limited in scope to the New England states. There is both annual membership fee as well as a fee for the decennial accreditation process. The accreditation process is commonplace among high schools and is less common in the middle and elementary schools. As an aside, I would just like to comment that the administrative team is having an ongoing discussion about whether or not to continue the process of NEASC at the elementary level, and also to take a look at other accreditation processes that exist that would come forward to the school board, and they're just starting that work of having conversations about accreditation. Okay, next question is, why was ice hockey requested again when it failed before the voters last year? The answer is that the ice hockey team was not requested in the superintendent's proposed budget for 2018-19. It was listed as an important request not funded, which was on slide 8 of my previous presentation. There's a whole history about the ice hockey team that I'll let you all read later, but I just want to make sure for the public and for the folks on both groups here that we did not request to have ice hockey funded again. Yep.
I suspect that the question here is why it was even recommended by the athletic department when it failed before the voters last year. I don't understand why.
It wasn't. It was listed as not funded.
I understand that.
Okay, I'm confused.
But it was originally requested.
It was requested. Right.
So I just don't understand why it's still coming up.
After it's been rejected.
After it's been rejected by the voters.
I think I see the question.
Oh, no, wasn't here.
That's a good answer.
No, I really don't know. If Vicki wants to speak to it, she's welcome to.
Sure. I mean, the reason that it was rejected by the voters, it was a very close vote. A lot of times warrant articles are brought more than one time to the public that was the first year it was brought because the group that is supporting this program, the Ice Hockey Booster Club, has been waiting patiently for hoping it to be put into the budget, and where it does not make the budget every year because it's cut before it gets to your level by the superintendent because of the reductions we need to make in the district. They felt, and it was advised to them to try to get the public to vote it in, since we can't even get it left in the budget for, I put it forward and it gets cut before it even moves forward out there. And it's an established program now. And I think any program that we've developed at the high school, once the program has been developed and established, usually the school district will fund that program so that the kids can benefit from having it.
I think.
We don't have programs here that the kids pay to do things.
I think, okay, I'm sorry. Okay.
So that's why I put it back in, because I feel it's important to support these kids that have been involved in this program.
I think the point that is trying to be made here is that it went to warrant article a number of times and it was rejected, am I correct?
Once.
But, okay, but the point is it was rejected. So for us now to put it into the program would be going against the wishes of the people at the warrant article, that should not be the school districts or the athletic director's decision to make. That should be the people. And if the people then say, yes, have hockey, by all means. But as of now, the people have said no to hockey. So in a sense, you'd be subverting the wishes of the people at their warrant article vote. So I think that's why it's been constantly turned down by the school board. School board, it has to do what the people say, especially on, well, they don't have to, but should, in my opinion, do what the people say, especially on warrant articles. If we were to then put something in, we'd be going, in my opinion, against the wishes of the people.
I agree with that thing that this has been brought forward for several years. This is the only time that it went to warrant article because we have not been able to move forward as a district to add any sport here, be it ice hockey or any other sports we're trying to add.
Well, I think what I'm saying is if there's going to be an expense, that expense on us, because the precedent's been set, go to warrant article. I think we need to stay going to warrant article. And once the people decide, beautiful, whichever they decide, we will do what the people vote on. But for us to now somehow put something in after people said no, I don't know. I'll ask the budget committee and the school board. You can agree or disagree on that, what I just said.
I think the question's been answered. I mean,
the question is answered.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I just want to be clear. It didn't come forward in the budget, but I understand now the context of it more clearly. And certainly we'll take all of this conversation into advisement. That's just a really nice way of saying we're not bringing it forward again. Okay. Thank you, Vicki. Yep. Do we have more questions on that?
I thought Jim was out.
I just wanted to make a follow-up, having followed the school board for several years. Last year was the first year that the hockey boosters came forward and asked for this to be funded. Prior to that, they had always committed to the school board and the administration that they would be responsible for funding hockey. So that was a big change.
Okay. Point taken. Thank you. Page 25, you can ignore question 1. There was an accidental duplicate when we were condensing the slides.
24.
Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah, this one.
Yeah.
Want to read this one? What plans and costs lie in future for enrichment, and what is the status of maker spaces in each school in future plans? What are the limitations on furthering enrichment for the students, and how do you measure specific outcomes for students and evaluate spending plans? So basically what I did was I had each of the 3 schools on the plan tonight answer this question at length, so I'll read this. Just bear with me for a minute. Memorial has moved away from the traditional enrichment teacher position to a STEAM teacher. The STEAM teacher is science, technology. I'm going there. Sorry, hang with me, Mr. Swayze. STEAM is science, technology, engineering, arts and math. Thank you. thought it was arts and math, but I just want to make sure.
You don't even know.
Hey, I told you there's a lot of them, I swear. The STEAM, usually it's STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, so the A threw me off a little bit with the arts, which I love. The STEAM teacher at Memorial provides enrichment to all students through her rotation schedule and collaborates with teachers at all grade levels to extend learning in math and science, adding engineering and technology experiences that tie directly to the curriculum and are seamlessly integrated. Under the current model at Bakey, the enrichment teacher takes on two very distinct roles, an interventionist and the enrichment coordinator. As an interventionist, this person instructs 60 to 80 students throughout the year in math and an additional 60 to 80 students in literacy. This person works with grade level teams each week to identify specific students that have shown mastery in a topic that classroom teachers must spend continued time on in the classroom. So it's kind of a consultancy type of model. This data informs how enrichment lessons are created so that student learning can be enriched and extended as needed. The person also works closely with grade levels in the development of curriculum units, specifically science in recent years. As the enrichment coordinator, this person manages the entire artist in residency budget for the year, along with several other whole school enrichment opportunities. The middle school has created a dedicated science and discovery lab, which now houses a complete makerspace. Science teachers use space for in-depth classroom labs, but all faculty have access to use the space to complement their instruction. Students are also able to access the space to work independently on individual projects for all classes. The computer lab is available during all lunches, as well as success/extended learning period, ELP, blocks to offer workspace for all classes, including music and art. Individual students are also using the lab on a regular basis for personalized learning projects in animation, video editing, coding, web design, and robotics. The student-built school garden project has been incorporated into several classes with plans to extend it further in the coming year with individual grade level projects. Food continues to be harvested and served in our cafeteria as well as donated to local food pantries. I need glasses. That was a long one. Y'all good?
Okay.
Anything you need, Corey?
Are you, you're modifying this, like, before putting it up on the web?
This is the building's direct answers. We're gonna fix the acronyms.
I just know, well, the word makerspace is one word, not two.
Thank you very much. We can do edits, yes. Makerspace. Michael, you got that one? Patty's got it.
I don't know if the community,
Our team has discovered its inherent editor, and that is Patty. She's very good.
Two ways.
Are we getting hoopy here, folks?
Yeah, we are a little. Go ahead.
At Memorial, it talks about what the enrichment teacher does in science, technology, engineering, and math, but it doesn't really address what the enrichment teacher does in the arts. Do you know?
Oh, did you ask for Memorial?
This is a new position this year for the STEAM teacher, so we're working toward expanding her role. Right now, she's focusing on science and mathematics, because those are areas that all the students have on a more regular basis than just in arts. But she does work with the art teacher. Our art teacher is currently on maternity leave, but she does work with the art teacher to involve some design aspects. And right now, she's been working with grade 5, and they're working on an architectural design, so that includes some engineering and arts.
Yeah, I think part of this is, what limitations are there on furthering enrichment for the kids? Are there limitations, or are you exactly where you want to be? It's a question of the principals to see.
Yeah, I think I'm going to defer to them. I would assume that there are always limitations that could be extended with more resources, but I want to kind of hear what they...
I want to know.
Yep. And were you thinking about the maker spaces being created in each building with adequate 3D printers, types of material, or are you thinking staff, or both?
I'm thinking, personally, I'd love to see maker spaces. I'd like to see little bits for each one of the classrooms, which is about $4,500 a school. Mm-hmm. I really think kids learn well with hands-on opportunities to learn, which is what the maker space provides. So I personally would like to see maker spaces expanded, and I wonder what the thinking is within the schools.
At the middle level, our limitations have to do with personnel. And an example would be that we lost 2 science teachers at the end of last year, one of which had
created a makerspace and left. And I think that's one of the limitations. And the other is that as we're getting smaller, we are going to be downsizing in terms of teachers. And one of the teachers will certainly be a science teacher as we move forward. So that's one of the limitations. But I think that the fact that we do performance assessments, which is very similar to what we discussed being done in the makerspace, we have those in operation right now. We have our students, all of the classes have access to the makerspace. It is in a designated lab space. It's not a teacher space. It's a designated lab space. And that's, I think as we move forward, we will want to increase the number of makerspaces that we have in our building.
Thank you.
Chris? So at Bakey, we have, I would say, a makerspace that's designated. I know that our teacher has been helpful in creating that space. In terms of limitations, given everything that she already does right now, it's hard to say that we're not limited in how that could be accessed and how it is being utilized. We do have some little bits in our makerspace as an example. It's kind of interconnected to a lot of things that have been said tonight. We've had limited professional development, and so we have a resource that's a very valuable resource that very few people in our building know how to actually utilize to its full capacity. So I think with professional development, with maybe some additional human resources, I think we could actually see, a makerspace come to a much bigger, play a much bigger role than it currently does. I think there's not a lack of desire. It's just we have the space. We don't have necessarily the manpower to build that into.
I wonder if it's anything that could be thought about to involve parents and train them to help out, and just coming into the classrooms and helping maybe with some of that. Maybe they could get some of that professional development once it's available. It's just a thought. In memorial?
Did you have anything you wanted to add?
I would just reiterate, we're still working through the STEAM teacher, the new position, and we're building that. I can't use a fund here, but we're building it as we go. So we are continuing to add different components to what she's got in her classroom. And again, it's about resources. We're talking here today about cutting funding to a lot of things and looking at, textbooks and materials and things like that. And I would advocate that we need to have a wider array of resources available to us, and to really think about what are we putting in front of our students K-5, how is that going to impact the trajectory in K-12, making sure that we have enough to give everybody at all levels, and to be open-minded about these things that are coming forward. Things like makerspaces are wonderful topics that we can use to discuss for professional development, things that you're not going to get in a UNH class necessarily, because these are new things. We have teachers and educators that are innovating across the country and across the planet, that we need to make sure that we have enough time and energy and money, quite honestly, to spend on our teachers to educate them on this. So I think that it's an all-encompassing kind of question, Ms. Collier, and I appreciate the fact that you're thinking about how to help our students at all levels.
You bet.
Okay. I'm on slide 25. What do you identify as needs and oh, I'm sorry. We already did this question. It was the one that was moved forward. I'm going to go to the next one. Administrator salaries increased only by 1.99% overall, yet the student services director's salary and admin salaries SAU increased by 13.05% and 17.05% respectively. Why? The answer is that the budget reflects the finances necessary to offset the salary disparities and wage adjustments due to staffing changes. So without being specific about specific positions, we've had to make adjustments, and some people have been hired at higher levels and some people have been hired at lower levels, and we'll be discussing that in detail tonight in the non-public. Professional development. What is the increase from last year? What's staff will receive an increase, admin, teachers, guidance, et cetera, what form will this take, i.e., will individuals get more money or more hours, or does building or department get an increase? Who decides what professional development will be pursued, admin or individuals? What are your plans for PD with the requested budget? What are your priorities for PD in upcoming years? Specific costs to implement, and how do you measure the outcomes for students and staff? What is the cost-benefit analysis of deferring more professional development for next year to future years? Please outline how you would allocate $50,000 to $100,000 spending increase and how the benefit will be measured. In previous budgets, the professional development line has been slashed in order to preserve student programming. In order to improve student learning and outcomes, we can no longer ignore the need for ongoing teacher training for both experienced Sanborn teachers as well as teachers who are new to the Sanborn community. The professional development in this line falls under control of the superintendent's office and is earmarked toward advancing district-wide programming needs. It will be used to provide both targeted assistance to specific teachers as well as district-wide initiatives in literacy, numeracy, intervention, enrichment, competency-based learning, and personalization. In the past, Title II has helped with these costs, but the funding is being reduced annually. In addition, the federal monies have restrictions that may affect our ability to obtain them. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that my vision for professional development is that, again, groups of teachers working in a professional learning community, looking at student work and their skills, identifying needs, and then us supporting those needs in addition to working with teams of teachers or whole school approaches to identify needs and provide support. So the answer to the part about who would get the support, it depends on the need. Right? It really is all needs-based. And the outcomes are obviously, we've talked about this since the day I interviewed for this job. The SAT scores at the high school are a concern. Our literacy scores for K2, we want to see 100% of those kids reading at benchmark. Right? So those are the first two areas, but there's also a large group in between that needs support to make sure that we get there. We really need to look at how do we get every kid in geometry their freshman year. So what needs to happen in terms of remediation prior to their freshman year? I just want to remind everyone that a $34 million budget, we currently have funded 0.001% for professional development. Oh, yep.
So at my community college, we have many college students that aren't prepared for college level work, and we have to provide remedial education for them so that they are up to speed even though they have high school diplomas. I'm just circling back around about professional development. I'm just concerned that professional development dollars, and you've asked for about $500,000, if I go back to page 4, if you add up the 200,000, the 100,000, the 280s.
No.
For different, well, it's.
No, if we had a dream world and money wasn't an issue, was the answer to the first question.
Yes.
We've
right.
actually asked for 75,000.
Right.
That's what we
But
actually asked for.
Ideally, you'd prefer a much larger budget for PD.
I don't think that's fair, because professional development, if the question was written at the beginning, which I very much caution people about, it specifically said, what would you do if money was not an object? Money is an object.
Yes.
So in a very fair situation, we've asked for $75,000. If you gave us $500,000, I could work miracles.
Start the car.
So my only point being, like I mentioned, the universities provide education degrees. They're taking lots of classes in special ed and literacy, math curriculum, math education, and I'm just concerned that, not with your request per se, but that the universities are not training teachers adequately so that PD could, unless it's targeted to things like a new math curriculum that we're developing or software training, specific new techniques that we're using, new school accounting software, that we're providing remediation to teachers after they leave the universities. And I think if that's the case, if any of the spending is necessary for that purpose that the university should be hearing from us loud and clear.
So, just to clarify, for people who aren't familiar with licensing for teachers in New Hampshire, it's, correct me, 75 hours per endorsement on your teaching license? That's correct, right? So 75 hours per endorsement on your license. So let's say an experienced teacher will very typically have a SPED endorsement, a math endorsement, maybe something else.
I had three.
There you go. So then Mr. Broderick would be at 75 hours of professional development times 3 to maintain his endorsement. So it's not, number one, it's not arbitrary. Number two, in order to keep up, I don't think anybody wants to go to a doctor that went to medical school 35 years ago. And if the medical school did a good job, the doctor should still be doing just fine treating all of us today. There are requirements for medical professionals, most other professionals, to stay up to date and trained with the latest innovations in your field. And education is no different. Secondly, I want to just say that by having a, 0.001% of the budget, was that right? 1/1000th of the budget? 1/100th?
1/100th.
1/100th.
Actually, less than that. It's
Less than 1/100th of our budget allocated to professional development sends a very clear message to the teachers in this district
Or those coming.
about the value we place on training them, keeping them current with their endorsements, and making sure that they have access to the most current and effective tools. It also sends a very clear message to me, to students, saying, we want you to be the best. We want you to have the latest and greatest skills and be college and career ready, but we do not want to provide more than 1/100th of our school district budget to promote that best practice educational up-to-date in the teachers. And wow, that is a message that I certainly am not comfortable sending as a school board member. So without speaking to the specifics of the, $75,000 you requested in your budget, I hope everybody in this room thinks very clearly about the message that we're sending to teachers and to students. And if you would think that that was an appropriate message that you would want given to other professionals who treat you, your doctors, even auto mechanics. We've got auto mechanics in my family, and they go every year to be trained because cars are changing and to maintain their status. So that's a really troubling message.
Real life, because I had 3 certifications, but primarily I was a biology teacher. Do you really want me to teach the same genetics I learned 40 years ago, as if there's no change in genetics over the last 40 years? I mean, what kind of education would I be giving the kids? This is a Punnett square, that's it? I don't even know what a Punnett square is, but the point is, I think there's been a few changes in genetics over the last 30, 40 years from when I first learned genetics back at Salem State College. So if you don't keep this ongoing education, and if you don't tell the teachers that, we're going to keep you up to date. I mean, what message are you sending? You can't do that. So in-service training is very, very, very important. Just take a look at science, computers, all courses, but for example, you don't want to teach a teacher the same thing they did 40 years ago.
Jim?
I haven't heard anybody say that they're not in support of professional development funding. I think that we're all working hard to find the funds to make that work. Specifically, though, the restrictions that may affect our ability to obtain grants, can you elaborate a little bit on just some of those?
Yeah, I think it's so important to recognize that all grant money comes with strings attached. So, for example, Michael just spent months writing his first Title II application, which is federal money that we receive for professional development that is decreasing significantly annually because of federal funding. But the money comes with, you have to develop the plan for that professional development money in August and September of this school year for the rest of the year, and if we need to shift gears, you can't do that. So once it's written, you have to use it for what it's written and approved for. It doesn't provide any, what I'm trying to model for our organization, Jim, is that the best practice for teaching and learning for kids is that we know exactly what they want them to know and be able to do, and then we create clear goals for them and steps to get there. I want to do that for our teachers in a responsive way. What my term for professional development is called differentiated PD. I've run districts where we've had a day where we have 16 different offerings in a day, and teachers could choose the different offerings based on their specific needs, and the offerings are created by surveys of the teachers to give us feedback about what they need help with. These are very highly trained professional people who are trying to grow their own practice based on what they see their students knowing and able to do. Now, there are situations, like the PIP question that was asked earlier, where somebody needs to be told that they need some support. I want to be clear, those are very rare. Typically, teachers know what they need help with, and they ask for it. And so the flexibility to address those needs is what I'm thinking of.
So it's almost like you need two pools of money. One would be the grant money that's very structured as to how it can be used. And,
right.
And specifically defined, you can't go outside of that. The other is money that you can be flexible with.
Right. So when I raised achievement in Freeport, Maine, when I worked there, we had a full-time literacy coach, a full-time literacy interventionist, 6 regular education paraprofessionals that worked in literacy, and $200,000 in professional development money just at the surface. And then we funded other things on top of that. If we want to support teaching and learning, it is expensive.
My lens on restrictions, though, if you don't mind me saying, sir, is we have 18% free and reduced between our communities, our population that we know of. Obviously, there might be a bit more.
Yes.
We have 18% free and reduced. There's multiple grants that are given out right now and available to many communities, like from Nellie Mae. Nellie Mae had specific restrictions that the communities that are applying had to be 50% free, not reduced, free.
Yeah, he's right.
There's only 3 communities in the state of New Hampshire that have 50% free. So my point being here is, while there's a lot of grants that are out there, we just don't qualify because of our demographic. So that ultimately is like a huge restriction. And then my last comment is, our staff put themselves through rigorous training on their own, thank you, Mr. Tamel, for helping us become PACE, leaders in the nation. And they did that on their own dime and their own dollar, of for which, I know that's a bad saying, so I'm always giving a hard time, of for which, if they want to continue doing this professional development and use the two right words, sir, in-service training, you need to pay for that. We need to go ahead and support that. So there's a lot of restrictions that we just...
So I just want to reiterate that our Title II money is tied to the free and reduced amounts. So in one district that I worked in recently had 60% free and reduced lunch. They got way more Title II money than a district like ours. And the unfair, the challenging assumption, not unfair, but it's challenging, is that if you have less free and reduced lunch students, then you have more money in your community to support things like professional development. And I want to be very clear that the team has made it very clear to me that over the last 4 or 5 years, instead of cutting teachers and positions as our enrollments have declined, they cut the professional development. Right. I'm telling you, as the new leader of this organization, I feel that is not the way to go. So there is a shift here in the paradigm, having me on board at the central office. And Michael wanted to ask a question or say something.
Make a quick comment if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Ambrose. So folks have been talking about professional development from the impact of improving student learning, which is obviously the most critical outcome. However, I want to also acknowledge the fact that in addition to traditional professional development geared toward teaching and learning, there's also training that has to happen for new teachers and for teachers in general. So for example, 8 years ago when we brought in this grading software program into the district, there was a tremendous amount of training that had to happen to get teachers up and running on that software. That's not something that you're ever going to learn in college because every school district has a different grading software. In our district, we have concussion protocols that we've developed with our teachers and our school nurses around how do you handle students in the classroom. We talk with students about return to play. So if a student has a concussion, there's a certain protocol that must be followed before they can safely be allowed to return to the playing field. We have that same model that we've adapted to the classroom. So it's a return to learn, because as many of you probably know, taxing the brain mentally during a concussion is just as dangerous and detrimental to the healing process as taxing it physically. So we have to train teachers on how do you deal with a student that has a concussion. As you know, if you follow sports, concussion is only something that's been thrust upon the national stage for the last 4 or 5 years. And we're hearing all kinds of studies about this, and we're learning more about that. That's not something you're going to learn in college. When a new teacher comes in, they have to be taught and trained how to enter professional development into our MLP, My Learning Plan software program. When the very first data comes along and they need to learn how to use ASOP in order to request a sub and put in for a sick day, that takes training. So I want you to think of the funds that Mr. Ambrose has mentioned, not just professional development to support teaching and learning, but we have to get our professional staff up and running with the processes that we use in our district, and there are many. Yes?
There was a grant that you got for the New Teacher Center.
Yes.
I was wondering how much that grant was.
So it was an in-kind sort of grant. It was valued at $10,000, although I never saw any of that money. The way it worked was the Seacoast area of the NEA, National Education Association, a teachers union, had put together a grant proposal to bring a national organization called the New Teachers Center to the Seacoast area. I learned about that grant, and I was the only person who applied because there was a process to go through, and it was a very short turnaround. So ultimately, it was supposed to be a consortium of Seacoast schools coming to Sanborn, where this national trainer was coming in to train us on how to build an induction program. It turned out that it was only Sanborn educators and one educator from the Northwood School District. So essentially, we got a private training full day valued at $10,000.
That's great. Was that enough, or was there additional costs that you incurred with new teacher training?
There are, up until this, so to back up one step, years ago there was a mentoring program in the district. And that mentoring program was run by the Director of Student Services. As professional learning communities became more prevalent in the district, we learned that a lot of the mentoring was happening naturally on those professional learning communities. And so the mentoring program sort of withered on the vine. We learned after 4 or 5 years without the mentoring program that the professional learning community was doing a fantastic job getting teachers up and running with the teaching and learning aspect of being in our community, but there were some things that they were missing, and I just identified some of those. How do I use MLP? How do I use ASOP? How do I use the grading program? And so at the last collective bargaining agreement negotiation, the Sanborn Regional Education Association and the negotiating team from the administration, which included school board members, negotiated back into the collective bargaining agreement for professional staff a mentoring program. The language, it was one sentence, and it was very vague. It basically said that the SREA would work with the district administration to create a mentoring program. So this summer, I met with the SREA representatives, and we began the initial stages of building that. But we felt like we needed some consultation from professionals who've done this and with great success, and that's why we sought out the grant.
Okay. So my question is, you had the 10,000, which supported one day.
Right.
Did you need additional days, or were you able to cover things in the one day?
So as of right now, we have enough to keep us busy for quite some time with what we've learned.
Okay.
I think it will be some time before we need additional help. It may be that we ask for help at some other point. We have a natural connection now with this organization. But I think certainly for this year, I feel like the team has, I don't want to speak for the rest of the folks that were in the room, Patty and Chris, you were there. It felt like we had a lot of work to do.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So can I just make one more? So lest I be accused of being anti-professional development, I am not, but I do, as a teacher, have office hours where I read the lit journals, new textbooks. Our teachers have prep time where they could probably read up on certain things to keep up with their discipline. We have conference monies available now for teachers to go out of town for training. It's available in the CBA. I like the idea of mentoring stipends. We have that at my district as well. But I'm just a little concerned about the size of the total requests on the wish list, that's all. And hopefully, as our teachers are trained and become more seasoned, and with the literacy coaching, the amount will level off, hopefully.
The request was $75,000.
Right, I just want to be clear. My request in this budget was initially $100,000.
Which I support.
We reduced it to 75 because we couldn't get the budget to the 2.8% decrease to fund it year to year flat, which is what the board requested. Everything in the front of that budget is not in the budget. In this presentation was in response to the if money was not an object. I know you all get it, but I'm just saying it for the public. Thank you for clarifying. Okay.
And what was requested is less than 1/100th of our budget.
No, what we currently have is less than 1/100th. What's requested is 75,000. I mean, it's still two 100ths.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
two and a half 100ths. I mean, I'm estimating, you know. I'm using my math. Michelle has much better math. All right, Mr. Swayze.
Next question. Oh, sorry.
I think Charlie.
I'm not quite sure how I feel about this professional development thing that's now coming forward. And I understand it's 75,000 this year, but I can see where some people want it to head. I think the huge difference is with your doctor and auto mechanic, they're not taxing people. And that's the big difference here, is that we're asking people to be taxed to pay for this. The other thing that's an issue is I don't know how I feel yet. I'm going to keep an open mind.
Thank you.
But I think you presume a stagnant workforce. And yeah, we can develop this teacher and that teacher and this teacher, but they could be gone tomorrow. So we, I think, as a district, as a business, have to decide, are we going to pay, which really becomes a personal benefit, something to an employee, that they will then take away and go somewhere else with. And that's, I think, the issues that we've got to look at. And yeah, you throw all these little percentages around, but $1,000 here, $2,000 there, $5,000 there. Soon you're talking, what's the expression? Now you're starting to talk about real money.
Yep.
And it all is real money. Every dime comes out of some taxpayer's pocket, whether it be 15 cents or $15. And that's my biggest issue, is that the difference here is you're paying for a personal benefit that's being taxed to someone. So we'll just look at it.
Roderick?
I see your analogy.
Yeah.
But I assure you, when a mechanic takes a day off to go and learn, and his employer pays him for that day's salary and the training.
They don't always pay him.
Well, my experience is that when you have an employee and he's going to increase a benefit for your corporation, you pay him for that day and you pay for that course. Now, where do you get that money? Let's assume it is a mechanic, and you do brake jobs, and he's learning how to do a brake job. Trust me, the cost of that brake job just went up a little bit. So you may not call it taxes, maybe you call it labor, but that cost is not just written off by the person who owns the business. He includes that cost in whatever service you're going to get or whatever goods you're going to buy. So call it taxes, call it labor costs, call it what you want, but I assure you, when there's an expense, somebody's going to pay it.
I have one last comment. I actually appreciate you for reiterating that, Mr. Project. And Dr. Brown, you've indicated this on numerous occasions and supported, the opportunity to go ahead, not stipends, but merit pay. And quite frankly, I look at this as merit pay for the entire body of staff district-wide. Again, the most important way to affect student outcomes is to do direct instruction in the classroom with the teacher, right? So again, to affect student outcomes, the most impactful way to do that is direct instruction in the classroom. These teachers are professionals, and they got to evolve too. Right? anyways, we can go on and on. It's a philosophy conversation.
Somewhat.
And so.
Can we move on?
Thank you. Yep. Question, special education salaries are down 19%, 4%, and 12% at Bakey Memorial and MD. I wasn't sure what that meant, but
Middle school.
I would school the
I suspect that's supposed to be middle school.
middle school, okay, respectively, but are up by 44% at the high school. Please explain, is this a reallocation or, question, special ed guidance is up at Bakey by 28.24%. Is this a reallocation from special ed or, question mark? The answer is that reallocations are due to grant-funded positions, and Jody can elaborate on that. There is no guidance special education at Bakey School, so that was a little confusing. And Jody, would you like to speak to those reallocations due to grant-funded positions?
So in the past, every 3 years, you had to switch out the personnel that were in the grants. You can use your grant for several different purposes. In this district, we tend to use the grant to offset salaries. So right now, we have about $424,000 in IDA grant money, which offsets for four full-time teachers, a partial teacher, 7 paraprofessionals, and in addition, some contracted services. In the past, we had to switch those people out. Depending on the amount of money we get from the grant every year, we also have to account for those differences because salaries are going up, which means the salaries are going up. We can't keep the same personnel in that grant from year after year if we're not getting more money every year. So in addition to that, we then have to make switches. So this year alone, we've already made 3 switches to high school personnel because there used to be people coming out of the grant that were at the high school level. We had to switch those individuals out. Now they're coming from other locations, Memorial, Bakey, the middle school, and now we have to pay for those high school positions out of the salary line.
So I think to kind of summarize what she's saying is that to meet the requirements of the grant, you have to move people from locally funded to grant funded over a certain period of time. So if you just look at the budget across percentages, you see increases in one school, but they went to the local in another area. We can't, obviously those kinds of percentages, we can't just kind of flip that around. But I can see how that would be confusing when you're looking at year to year or percentages in a budget document. Great question. Support salaries are up 11.4%. Is this due to the increased number of personnel? And if so, where is the need for the increase? The increase is a result of 6 new hires plus step salary increases. Of the new hires, 4 were budgeted for and 2 were new to meet unanticipated student needs. This is a perfect example of how if a student moves in with an IEP, we have to have contingency lines to clearly show that we are paying for this person because someone moved in or had a need get identified. Right now, we don't have it clearly defined, and it's something that I feel very strongly about in the budget. We have about $230,000 in special education contingency money, but it's not nearly adequate to cover the needs, the fluctuations in special ed. Just so you know, one out-of-district placement, if a student moves into our district, their family, and the student already has an out-of-district placement from another community, that costs us $100,000 the minute they move in. There's no question we have to pay it. So it's so amorphous and hard to predict that the best thing to do for a community is to set up very clear and funded reserve accounts that then go back to the taxpayers if they're not used. And those reserve accounts are typically expended by having a minimum threshold that needs to be clarified or voted on by the board before it's expended. That's been my experience in the past, so it's transparent.
A reserve account like that would have to be a warrant article, would it?
I believe so, Michelle.
Yes, would traditionally be a warrant article.
Okay.
Yep. Thanks for asking. The next question was the new budget request of $75,000. What this for? I think we've kind of we put that one to bed. And then the next part was that the budget request for $75,000. There's a second part that says the PowerPoint presentation shows 2 new requests totaling $11,785. What's the purpose of the remaining amount? There's kind of an explanation here, and we did very carefully clarify this question with the person that asked it. It was Dr. Brown, and we just wanted to make sure that we had the right accounts here and that we got the information out to you publicly. Basically, she just wanted to understand the requests, and those are the accounts that those requests are for. So the last page has a pretty, yes, we are finally there, 3.5 hours later. I just want to quickly say that this last one, the 5-year strategic plan lists the following new items for 2018-19. As I presented last week, 2 weeks ago, we did not fund those items in the strategic plan or the CIP plan. There's no way that we could do that and meet the board's request. Just moving from one year to the next with the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement salary increases, moved us up 2.8%. So in order to meet the task that was set to the administrative team through the board's directive to me, we couldn't even entertain that. We actually had to reduce the budget by $950,000. And it's important to recognize that if we had done what the CIP plan required, it was requiring this year a $4.5 million increase to the budget. What we have done instead is engaged in a process of continuous improvement. We're looking at defining student success, and we've asked to have a facilities study with community membership to have a conversation about our long-term facilities plan that would then drive a revision of the CIP and our budgeting. Before we conclude, I just want to say thank you to everyone for your patience. It was a lot of questions. And I just want to take a moment to thank the administrative team they worked really hard to help me answer these questions. They have been emailed, called, prodded, and met with a lot in the last 5 days. So I just wanted to thank them for all their hard work. Thank you very much.
If I could take the floor for a minute, there's a couple of things I want to do. Phyllis, I was remiss, Larry Heath is not here. I don't know if you picked up on that. Okay. Another thing I wanted to bring up is I was asked during the break if a person could speak to a public comment. She was not here at the beginning. And I asked what the question was, and it's certainly germane to the next meeting we have. Except when I sat down, I realized that this school board meeting is a regular agenda school board driven meeting, and the budget committee has been invited. Next meeting will be actually the opposite. We will have to have a meeting because of the quorum, but the agenda is really going to be the budget committees. The superintendent will be doing the same thing. So my question is to actually the chairman of the budget committee, because I told this person that they would be able to bring up at a public comment next time.
We have public comment in budget committee.
Okay, does anybody in the audience have a problem that the public comment they would like to, anybody in the audience have a problem? Tammy? Does anybody in the audience have a problem that the question they asked me they would like to ask can be brought up at the budget committee's public comment? See, I forgot that next week we're kind of the invited guests.
Well, 2 weeks, the 30th.
Okay, so if it's all right with you, rather than continue the time, we'll have a public comment section of the school board next week, because we have a lot to digest, all right? And to tell you the truth, I would like to have a public comment next week in the school board meeting, even though it's kind of your meeting, because I'm sure this is going to generate some public comments that we went through tonight. So does that seem all right?
I would think that's absolutely fine. I don't
Okay, all right. So I'm sorry, Tammy, that I did tell you next meeting, but when I sat down, I realized it's really not a scheduled school board meeting with an agenda, but we will make sure you can have a school board public comment.
And note that's on the 30th, which is a Thursday.
It's also on a Thursday, it's not a Wednesday, it's the 30th. Okay, all right. So I think I've covered you okay?
I was just hoping to be able to speak to the board tonight because of the ability.
But again, it's going to be very relative to the next one too, and you'll actually have more information because we'll be covering the other schools, right? You know, I mean, you know, I just don't want to get out of the sequence and say later on, well, you had the precedent then, why aren't you doing it now? Okay.
They pushed that in.
Yeah. No, I understand. I don't want you not to be able to make a public comment. Yeah, all right. I want your questions to be asked, you know. So that's the only thing. Okay, so, other business. We have any further discussions on the part of the school board concerning what the superintendent presented? Can I go forward to the next meeting? Okay. So, The next meeting is going to be on a Thursday. I realize it says here Wednesday, but it is, I believe, a Thursday, the 30th. And it'll be from 6 to 9 here at the library. Again, and I've already talked to the superintendent, our agenda is going to be very limited because it's really, as they are our guests tonight in a sense, I hope you understand my point, it's going to be a budget committee meeting primarily, all right? But we will be able to cover the things. So again, that's going to be Thursday, the 30th, from 6 to 9 here. This will be a joint meeting with the budget committee, okay? With that, I believe that concludes the public, right? We do have some non-public.
We have non-public, yeah.
I would like to have a motion to go into non-public, RSA 91, it's written right there, if somebody would like to make that motion.
Move to go into non-public according to RSA 91A 3, section C and D.
Second.
Okay, you got this, okay, now, Karen? Yes, Corey? Jim?
Yes.
Oops, yes, that's unanimous from here. We have to poll for those.
I'd like to conclude our budget committee meeting. Can we have a
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, second? Okay. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you.